In this episode, I spoke with Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride, author of Gut and Psychology Syndrome, creator of the GAPS diet. Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride has a degree in medicine and postgraduate degrees in both neurology and human nutrition. In her clinic in Cambridge, she specializes in nutrition for children and adults with behavioral and learning disabilities and adults with digestive and immune system disorders. The GAPS diet basically starts off like the carnivore diet, and it's a dietary treatment that's quite successful, even though not widely accepted by mainstream medicine, something we discuss in this episode. I wanted to speak with Dr. Natasha because her way of treating health, starting with the gut, began decades ago, before the carnivore diet was known at all. She's absolutely brilliant. One thing we may disagree on, or I haven't decided completely, she adds in a certain type of raw milk to help heal the gut. Let me know what you guys think of that, if you tried it. I think the connection between dairy and inflammatory conditions is fairly solid. At least it was for me. However, not all dairy is equal, which is something we discuss in this episode. We also delve into foods in the GAPS diet, her opinions on mainstream medicine, the microbiome, and her opinion on North American cows, which was hilarious, to be honest. It's really nice to meet you.
Hello, Michaela. Hello, nice to meet you too.
Welcome to my podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me. I read a lot of your work in, I think it was 2016 when I first started to try and get my autoimmune disorder under control. And I was eliminating foods left, right, and center without any idea of what to do, really. And I came across your book about a year into my diet, and I think it aligned shockingly well with what I had already figured out just trying to treat myself. So I wanted to introduce you to my audience because I think the work you've done is incredibly important.
Thank you. What autoimmune disorder did you have?
Juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. It was later re-diagnosed as juvenile idiopathic arthritis, but it was severe. I had my hip and ankle replaced when I was 17. So, yes, it was tough. But I thought what we should just get started. If you could give a bit of a brief background to my audience about who you are and what it is you do.
Hello, my name is Natasha Campbell McBride. I'm the creator of a concept of GAPS, Gut and Psychology Syndrome and Gut and Physiology Syndrome. The concept of GAPS establishes a connection between the functioning of the digestive system in the person and the functioning of the rest of the body. Hippocrates, all those thousands of years ago, the father of modern medicine, Hippocrates, made a statement that all diseases begin in the gut. And the more we learn with our modern scientific tools, the more we realize just how correct he was. My first GAPS book, Gut and Psychology Syndrome, focused on the function of the brain, on all the problems that we can have with that function, learning disabilities in children and adults and mental illness. I've just completed the second GAPS book, Gut and Physiology Syndrome, which will come out this autumn and this year, wow, which focuses on the rest of the body, and it completes the GAPS concept. GAPS concept has become a global phenomenon from the time when the first book came out. The first book has been translated into 20 languages, and there are more translations coming in, and millions of people around the world are using this protocol for healing from chronic degenerative diseases.
Yeah. Okay. So when did your first book come out?
2004. And the second edition came out in 2010. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I found out about the GAPS diet, I think in 2016, like I said, but you were one of the first people who were, kind of before the whole paleo diet became something people do, or the keto diet, or right now what I'm on is called the carnivore diet. I mean, you were way before all of that. And I think you have elements of each of those diets in your protocol. So could you give a bit of a background about what you do in order to heal the gut? And that's what you believe is the cause of most illnesses.
I don't just believe it. I know it, because this is all my clinical experience with thousands of patients and the clinical experience of thousands of other holistic doctors confirm the fact that all diseases begin in the gut, all of them. So what is GAPS? What do we have in a GAPS person? We have an epidemic of GAPS, particularly in the Western world. And as mother and father pass their gut flora to the child at the moment of birth, this epidemic is getting deeper with every generation. We have a person with abnormal gut flora. Gut flora is that mass of microbes that live inside your digestive system. And it's, in a healthy situation, a highly balanced microbial community. There's all kinds of creatures in there, living in harmony with each other. They all plant each other, eat each other, control each other, don't allow any one of them to get out of control. And as a balanced community, as a harmonious community, all of these microbes work very well together, and they serve our body very, very well. Problem is, we humans are very good at creating imbalances in nature. Human body is a part of nature. Every time you take antibiotics, you kill off bacteria, only bacteria. These bacteria were controlling fungi, viruses, protozoa, archaea, worms, flukes, and all kinds of other creatures that live in that harmonious community inside your body. Once you've knocked out the bacteria, all these other creatures suddenly become uncontrolled. They overgrow, the whole balance is gone, and all the creatures which were beneficial for us as part of a harmonious, balanced community, when out of control, when overgrowing, become pathogens. Because there are no such thing as a good microbe or a bad microbe. All microbes can cause disease, every one of them. It's the balance, it's the overall diversity and the balance in the microbial community that makes every microbe do only good things for you. But every microbe, when it gets out of control, can cause disease and can cause disorder. And that's what happens in GAPS people. And as I said, the mother and the father pass their gut flora to the child at the moment of birth. We have now generations of people with damaged gut flora. And with every generation, it becomes worse and worse. Because, for example, if grandparents had maybe 1 or 2 courses of antibiotics, which came out on the market in the 1950s or 60s, slightly damaged their gut flora, and then they passed that slightly damaged gut flora to their children. But then their children grew up in a very different world, very different to the world where their parents grew up in. They grew up in a world where antibiotics were given to them for every cough and sneeze, where agricultural industry appeared on the planet, which is using increasing numbers of agricultural chemicals, most of which are antibiotics in their nature. They don't just kill bacteria, they kill all kinds of microbes. They destroy all kinds of microbes. At the same time, food industry appeared on the planet, which destroys food and turns it into concoctions, chemical concoctions, which pollute human bodies, don't feed them very well, and feed pathogenic microbes, cause complete havoc in the human body. And then they grew up in the generations where girls were given contraceptive pill from a very young age, and they took that pill for quite a few years before they're ready to start their family. The pill has a devastating effect on the immune system of the woman, hormonal system, and on her microbiome, on her microbial community in her body. Because we have microbial community not only in the gut, we have microbes everywhere in the human body. They live in your lungs, in your heart, in your blood, in your abdominal cavity, in your brain, in your eyes. They're everywhere. And they're all supposed to be balanced. It has to be a diverse, balanced community. When we take chemicals which destroy some portion of that microbial community, they absorb into your bloodstream and they damage the microbial community everywhere in your body. So coming back to those generations of young people who went through their childhood and young years, exposed to many, many man-made chemicals, which are increasingly became a norm on the planet. And so by the time they decided to have their first child, their gut flora is far more damaged than what they got from their parents. Becomes far more damaged. And that is what they pass to their children at the moment of birth. And with every generation now, the situation is accelerating. It's becoming more and more severe. The child is born already with a GAPS, gut and psychology, gut and physiology syndrome, with abnormal microbial community in the body. When a person's digestive system is dominated by abnormal flora, abnormal microbial community, you do not digest your food well. You can be eating the best quality food in the world, but your digestive system is unable to break it down properly and absorb it properly. So you develop multiple nutritional deficiencies. Majority of that food is converted by the pathogenic microbial community into a whole river of poisonous chemicals. At the same time, these microbes damage the integrity of your gut wall. It becomes porous and leaky. It becomes like a sieve. And all these chemicals absorb into your bloodstream. The foods don't get a chance to be digested properly before they absorb through that damaged, leaky gut wall. You start absorbing everything undigested. Then the immune system finds these undigested foods in your blood and your lymph, looks at them, doesn't recognize them as food, and attacks them. And this attack can manifest itself as any symptom under the sun in any organ, and the symptoms can be immediate or delayed. So on any given day, the person has no idea what they're reacting to. You might be reacting to a piece of lamb you just had for lunch, plus a tomato you had yesterday, plus eggs you had 2 days ago, plus something else you had 2 weeks ago. In reality, you're reacting to everything you eat because most of your foods do not have a chance to be digested properly before they absorb. So what happens in a GAPS person, as a summary, instead of being a source of nourishment for you, your digestive system becomes a major source of toxicity. A river of undigested foods, poisonous chemicals, alive microbes, immune complexes, and all sorts of other damaging things flow from the gut into your blood, into your lymph, get distributed around the body, or wherever this toxic flow gets to, it will cause disease. And of course, the immune system has to join in because your immune system, its very existence is to deal with damage to your tissues, to deal with invaders in your body. This is an invader coming in from your digestive system. So your immune system will find tissues in your body which are contaminated by this toxic river coming from the gut. If it is your knee, your joint, let's say your knee, that's where some of this toxicity has accumulated. And many of these toxins like to attach themselves to proteins. They fit in nicely with proteins. They attach themselves to particularly sulfur-containing amino acids in the protein. And collagen, about 3/4 of all protein in the human body is collagen. This is an elastic protein that holds our bodies together. It is particularly richly represented in your joints, in your ligaments, in your bones, in your muscles, and in other parts of your connective tissue in the body. Collagen, unfortunately, is a magnet for toxicity. Many toxins coming out of the gut attach themselves to molecules of collagen. So let's say your knee, largely made out of collagen, this toxicity came in, attached itself to collagen molecules, and they changed those molecules' three-dimensional structure. So your immune system then finds these changed collagen molecules, sees that this is abnormal, this is a foreign abnormal protein. So the first thing that the immune system would do, it would launch an immediate response off the shelf, a response that is not specific, but it's immediate. It's right there, it's ready. Inflammation. What is inflammation? Your knee is swollen, red, hot, painful, and the function is limited. Inflammation is very effective at cleaning up contaminated tissues in the human body. So if this bunch of toxins came once and then stopped, inflammation will do the job very nicely. Your knee might be swollen for a few days, and then it subsides. The knee is left clean. The immune system has cleaned it up, repaired it. Everything's fine. You can forget about that episode. But if toxicity hasn't stopped coming, if your situation is chronic and the gut wall is leaky and the food continues absorbing undigested and the river of toxicity keeps flowing for months and months or years or most of your life, then inflammation is not enough. Then the immune system will use its other mechanism called autoimmunity, where it will learn about this contaminated collagen in your knees, memorize that information, and start creating specific antibodies, specific cells against those contaminated molecules of collagen. So your immune system will start destroying your knee, destroying those damaged, contaminated molecules. Our mainstream medicine considers autoimmunity to be a misguided behavior of our immune system. They still believe that the immune system doesn't know what it's doing and it's mistakenly attacking your own tissues. No, that's not the truth. Your immune system is never misguided. It always knows what it's doing. And it would use all kinds of mechanisms that it has in its toolbox, all kinds of tools it has in its toolbox to deal with the situation in your body. And it knows what's appropriate for what situation. So antibodies are important. Unfortunately, as soon as your immune system developed antibodies against contaminated collagen, it's not attacking clean collagen. Healthy collagen is your niece. Why would the immune system do such a thing? It will never do such a thing. What it's doing, your collagen is contaminated. So autoimmune disease should be renamed. It should be named the contamination disease, not autoimmune disease. Because autoimmune implies that the immune system is attacking self, attacking you. So based on that belief and based on that misunderstanding, our mainstream medicine has been busily suppressing people's immune systems with steroids and other terrible drugs. And they just beat the immune system down to stop it attacking your own body. So as a result, nobody's dealing with that contamination. It continues in your body, the disease progresses. But what happens with these drugs, the symptoms of your disorder, the red, hot, and swollen, and painful, and limitation of function, all those symptoms were caused by the immune system. Immune system that was cleaning up your knee, dealing with the contamination.
Yep.
As you beat the immune system down with powerful drugs, with steroids, destroy the immune system, the symptoms disappear because nobody's reacting, nobody's dealing with the situation. Did that stop the disease? No. The disease will continue destroying your knee. It will progress even faster now, but with nobody protecting you from it and nobody cleaning up your knee and nobody dealing with that situation in your body anymore. Our mainstream medicine has been at it for decades. The complete failure of this approach doesn't seem to be stopping them. But even now, the leading immunologists in the world seem to agree with what we have been saying for years in the alternative medical field, that the immune system is not misguided and that all autoimmunity is born in the gut. I'm absolutely convinced of it. Every autoimmune disease, no matter how far away from the digestive system it develops, it might be rheumatoid arthritis, it might be multiple sclerosis, it might be diabetes type 1, might be lupus, might be psoriasis, might be nephropathy. The roots of that disease are in the gut. Why? Because about 85% of your immune system is located in the gut wall. So your digestive system is the biggest and the most important immune organ in your body. This is where the immune system is being fed, is being looked after, and being properly informed. Because about 90% of all cells in your body live in your gut flora. 90%. It means your body is only 10%. It's a shell, a habitat for this mass of microbes that live inside us. And these 90% of us interact with 85% of your immune system all the time. They work together like two partners. So when the gut flora is abnormal in a person, when the person has gaps, gut and psychology, gut and physiology syndrome, the immune system becomes unbalanced, it becomes malnourished, it becomes intoxicated, and it has a huge workload because the gut becomes a major source of toxicity in the body. So that's where autoimmunity comes from, and every autoimmune disease, the treatment must begin from healing and sealing the gut wall. We need to rebuild the gut wall for the person out of quality materials. We need to close all those holes. And once those holes close up, that river of toxicity stops. It turns into a trickle, into a little stream, and eventually it stops. And once that stops, then everything in the body can be cleaned up, rebalanced, repaired. As long as this river of toxicity keeps gushing in, nothing can be repaired in the body. You will continue developing symptoms and you will continue getting ill. That is what we do with the GAPS nutritional protocol. We rebuild the gut wall for the person. We heal and seal the gut wall. We close all those holes. We change, rebalance, normalize the gut flora in the person. That vital microbial community inside the gut. There's nothing sterile in the human body. Majority of your body are microbes. So we have to forget the idea that we should be killing microbes or sterilizing anything. The more microbes, the merrier. The bigger the diversity, the better. All we need to do is rebalance it. Bring it all in the right, appropriate balance. And that's what we do with the GAPS nutritional protocol.
Yeah, wow. That's exactly what's happened to me throughout my life. is I was born and I was ill right away. And I was put on immune suppressants and my disease continued to get worse, even though all the swelling went away. So that's exactly what happened. And I started eliminating foods just out of curiosity. And I ended up on an all meat diet. So just beef. And beef seemed to be the only thing that wasn't triggering my immune system. So my theory was, okay, I stay on this for a while. Maybe the leaky gut will stop. And then I have to figure out how to fix the microbiome issue. So what's the first stage of GAPS that you suggest? How do you heal all those holes? Like, what is somebody who's had generations of antibiotics? What is somebody like that supposed to do?
The good news is that all cells in the human body live a short life. They work very hard, they get old, worn out, they die, and they get replaced by newly born cells. This wonderful process is called cell regeneration, and it's very active in all of our tissues and organs, everywhere. Every 3 months, you've got a new liver. All of your liver cells have died and got replaced by newly born liver cells.
That's so cool.
And in the gut wall, our gut wall, those cells only live for 2-3 days. The cell regeneration, cell turnover process there is extremely rapid. In order for the human body to give birth to trillions of new cells, new baby cells every day, building materials are required. Quality building materials. And that is what we provide in the GAPS diet. The core of GAPS nutritional protocol is the GAPS diet. It's the most important thing. If you take water out of the human body, about 70% of the human body is water. If we take that water out, what we're left with in the dry weight, 50-50, protein and fat. When we analyze that protein in the laboratory, we find that it's very similar to proteins in meat, fish, eggs, and dairy, animal foods. Plant proteins are completely unsuitable for building our protein. Their amino acid composition is wrong. Certain amino acids are missing, other amino acids are in excess, and they're indigestible for the human digestive system, plant proteins. Pea protein, soy protein, and all sorts of other proteins. In fact, they are very damaging for the digestive system of the human and for all other tissues in the body. The same with fats. When we take the human fat and analyze it in the laboratory, we find that in its biochemical structure, it's very similar to fats which come from lamb, pork, beef, goose, duck, ghee, butter, cream, these fats. Plants are full of oils, but their biochemical structure is very different and completely unsuitable for human physiology, for building our fats. We need some omega-3, omega-6, omega-7, some polyunsaturated fatty acids, but we need the tiniest minute amount per day. Just having a little salad, having an apple, having a handful of nuts is enough. You will get enough of those oils. Unfortunately, majority of people in the world are gorging on the industrially processed plant oils, vegetable and cooking oils. These are poisons. There are hundreds and hundreds of scientific studies which have been shown conclusively that they cause every chronic disease under the sun. Mental illness, infertility, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, Alzheimer's disease, all kinds of illnesses. Nobody should be eating these things and nobody should be cooking on these things. And unfortunately, all processed foods in our supermarkets are made with these oils. So all processed foods have to be out for any person who's trying to recover or maintain their health. So the only fats that are suitable for the human physiology to consume are animal fats. And what I found through my clinical experience that the more the merrier. The more animal fat a person manages to eat per day, the quicker they recover. There's no doubt about it. So it is animal foods that are the key. I have many patients in my clinic since I've written the first GAPS book. For those years, I learned something new every day from my patients because my patients are my teachers. That's where I derive all the information that I give to people. I haven't got this information from any book. My patients taught me all of this. Mm-hmm. And I had these children in whom, with ulcerative colitis, with autism, and people with mental illness, severe mental illness, and people with rheumatoid arthritis, and people with some other severe autoimmune illnesses, and also babies with FPIs. This is a new group of babies with food-induced protein enterocolitis syndrome.
Ooh.
These are little things which cannot digest any protein in the world at all, even mother's milk. makes them
Oh
sick,
my
these
God.
babies. They're very, very damaged, these babies. So when I started working with these very severe patients, and patients are getting more and more severe in the Western world, particularly in the English-speaking countries. I don't know what's happening, but our children are getting so sick.
Antibiotic use
It's terrible.
and sugar.
Not just antibiotics, the whole environment. The whole environment that we've created is unsuitable for our children to come into this world. So what I found in these patients, that even the first stage of the GAPS introduction diet, because in the first GAPS book, I have described two forms of GAPS diet. The full GAPS diet, which is easier to follow, it has a wider choice of foods, and the GAPS introduction diet, which is structured in 6 stages. And that is the diet which heals and seals your gut wall very effectively and quite quickly. But it's more difficult to follow. It's very restricted. So on the first stage of the GAPS introduction diet, we start with foods which are the easiest to digest and which provide the biggest amount of building materials for your gut wall to produce those trillions of new baby cells out of quality materials. Healthy, robust, rosy cheeks, bushy-tailed cells in your gut lining. So what we do with the GAPS introduction diet, we build a new gut wall for the person. Because human body doesn't waste time on healing a sick cell. If a cell is sick, it's killed and removed, and a new baby cell is born in its place. In order to give birth to them, we need quality materials if we want quality gut wall. And the quality materials come from animal foods. So on the first stage of the GAPS introduction diet, we eat a lot of meat stock. Everything's homemade. Everything's made out of fresh, best quality ingredients. Gelatinous stalks, lots of collagen in the stalk. We make it from collagenous, gelatinous tissues. We eat a lot of organs. We eat a lot of fermented foods, particularly fermented dairy. And we eat only cooked vegetables in a limited amount, low fiber vegetables. Nothing raw, no raw plant matter, and we start with small amounts of vegetables because plants are difficult for humans to digest and they damage the human digestive system, particularly the sensitive human digestive system. The easiest things to digest for humans are animal foods. That's a fact, a clinical fact, no matter what the science might be shouting from the newspapers and TV screens at you, whoever's paying for that science. So what happens? I found this group of patients with whom even the first stage of the introduction diet wasn't gentle enough for their digestive
that would be
system. Me. So we started removing plant matter because I knew through clinical experience, that plants are the problem. So we started removing all the vegetables bit by bit, and we finished up with no plants at all. I have called this form a no plant GAPS diet. These patients live on meat stock, on cooked meats, on fish, on fermented dairy products, on animal fats, and eggs. That's it. Not a leaf, not a speck from a plant kingdom is consumed. And only when we've done that, these patients started recovering. They recovered from ulcerative colitis, from Crohn's disease. They come off medication. Their inflammatory markers disappear. Everything becomes normal. They recover from learning disabilities and mental illness. FPI's children start growing and start developing and start recovering from this terrible situation. These are babies, these children. So I found it extremely successful. And I have quite a few patients who have been on this diet now for many years, 4, 5, 6 years, and they have no intention of introducing any plants. And they look beautiful and they're healthy. Some people ask me, where do they get vitamin C? Clearly, we don't know everything about vitamin C yet.
Yeah.
Now we know in the latest research that organ meats are quite a good source of vitamin C in the human body, as well as folate, all the B vitamins and fat-soluble vitamins and other vitamins. So these people show no signs of any kind of nutritional deficiencies. So it is these patients who taught me that human beings can live without plants perfectly well, but we cannot live without animal foods. That is an absolute fact. I'd like to sort of move into a little sideline here. I had anorexic girls, many anorexic girls coming into my clinic, and young people with bipolar disorder and psychosis and all sorts of problems. And quite quickly I've discovered that they became ill to such a degree because of misguided veganism and vegetarianism. We live in a world of nutritional misinformation, and the propaganda for vegetarians, for plant-based lifestyle is very strong at the moment.
Yeah.
These people are given an idea that it is morally right and it's healthy and it's saving the planet, this sort of thing. So these patients forced me to look into this direction, start researching it. And very quickly what I've discovered, that there are no scientific studies that we can trust in this area. Every study has been conducted by pro-vegetarian lobby, and they're just incorrectly designed, incorrectly analyzed. They just lie. Particularly the China study. That is the biggest lie of the world. In the world, absolutely. So, having discovered that fact, that there is no science I could rely upon, I went back to basic sciences, the science of physiology, zoology, biology, biochemistry, and clinical experience. My own clinical experience and clinical experience of my colleagues, of other holistic doctors. And based on that knowledge, based on all that information, I have written a book called Vegetarianism Explained, which came out 3 years ago now, where I explain that the animal foods and only animal foods feed and build the human body. They are the feeding, building foods because of the structure of the human digestive system. The way our digestive system has been designed, we can only truly, properly digest animal foods. Plants are indigestible for humans, for the human digestive system. And they do not feed us, and they provide the wrong protein and the wrong fats for building our physical structure. They cannot build or feed your physical structure, your heavy bones, your heavy muscles, your big brain, your big lungs, big liver, your big heart. Only animal foods can maintain and build your physical structure, properly prepared animal foods. Traditional cultures around the world have known this for millennia, this fact. That is why they will put the biggest effort into catching an animal, catching fish, getting meat, getting eggs, getting milk. And they would use plants only as a supplement to meat. And even then, through experience, they have learned that plants are indigestible. All plants are indigestible, particularly seeds of plants. And that is grains, beans, nuts, all sorts of seeds. They're particularly indigestible. They're full of chemicals called anti-nutrients, which damage our digestive system, damage our collagen, damage all other tissues in the human body. So they've learned that they must prepare the plants properly before consuming them, before even cooking them. So they've developed methods of fermentation, sprouting, malting, and cooking plants in such a way to make them more digestible, more nutritious for us, more acceptable for the human digestive system to derive some nutrition from. So having discovered all of that, that is what I explain in the book. Veganism, purely plant-based regimen, is not a diet, it is a form of fasting. It has been considered a form of fasting for tens of thousands of years in the Hindu culture in India, and they call it a fast, and they will never do it longer than 41 days or 42 days. Veganism, where you live purely, entirely on plants. When you start eating plants only, plants' purpose for the human beings is cleansing. Plants cannot feed the human body to any degree, but they are powerful cleansers. They have powerful chemicals in them which keep our bodies clean on the inside. They have phenols, salicylates, phytonutrients, and various other cleansing substances. And that is the purpose of eating plants, of keeping our bodies clean on the inside. So when people who are very toxic, people who are overweight, who go on a vegan regimen, in the first few weeks, as they start cleansing, a cleaner body feels better than a toxic one. So many symptoms start disappearing, they start feeling better. And this is the time when they write their evangelical books about veganism. But at a certain point, the human body will finish cleansing and it will need feeding. It will become hungry. And it will give you a signal, I'm hungry now, feed me. The way it will give you that signal is it will give you a desire for a roast chicken, for bacon, for fried eggs, for a piece of meat, for a pot of cream, for something like that. Problem is, many vegans in our modern world doing this for emotional reasons, political reasons, religious and other reasons. So they don't listen to their body. They override that signal and they continue, they force their body to continue fasting, to continue cleansing. And at that point, the body has no choice but to start breaking down less important tissues, muscle and bone, to feed more important organs. Your brain, your lungs, your heart, your liver, your digestive system. So the person starts losing muscle mass, starts losing bone mass, and eventually starts developing degenerative disease. And I have seen far too many young people like that. So we've sort of moved away from GAPS a little bit, but if you know anyone who believes in the plant-based lifestyle, please give them my book, Vegetarianism Explained, Making an Informed Decision. You might save a life. So coming back to the GAPS nutritional protocol, not only the brain is affected, but every organ, every tissue in the body is affected. And that is what I describe in the new book, Gut and Physiology Syndrome, which is coming out this autumn, where I will describe the full list of autoimmune illnesses, atopy, allergies, asthma, eczema, and various other allergy conditions, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, neurological illnesses, hormonal illnesses, and all sorts of other illnesses.
Have you had many patients intolerant to fermented dairy at the beginning?
Yes, a lot of people, when your gut wall is damaged and porous and leaky, there is a problem with dairy in the world. And the biggest problem is that we've got the wrong cows.
Okay, yeah, I've read about this.
That's right, that's the biggest problem. In the 60s and 70s, our industrial agriculture wasn't happy with how much milk a normal cow is able to give them. They wanted more profit. So they gave an order to the scientists to produce a cow that can give us more milk. So what the scientists did, they took animals which had a brain tumor in their hypophysis, which was overproducing growth hormone. This was sick animals. It had too much growth hormones. When a cow has too much growth hormones in her body, she produces more milk. She gives you more milk. And from these sick animals, they bred a new variety of cows, commercial breeds of cows, Holstein Friesian, huge beasts, which give us 3 times more milk than a normal natural cow is able to produce. These are Frankenstein animals. They're sick from the beginning. They have about a third of normal cow's life. By the age of 4, they have cancer. By the age of 3, they all suffer from arthritis and infertility. How can a sick animal give you healthy milk? A sick animal will give you sick milk. These are Frankensteins, and you're getting Frankenstein milk from it. And then our scientists, in other branches of science, have produced all this research to show us that milk causes every disease under the sun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cancer, infertility, heart disease, to mental illnesses and everything else. And all of that research has been done with Frankenstein milk. Most milk in our supermarkets and most dairy coming from the food industry are from these cows. They are Frankenstein dairy. Of course, they will make you sick. Of course. So number one thing to do with the dairy, you find natural breeds of animals that Mother Nature created, native breeds of animal, whether it's a goat or a cow or a ewe or whatever it is, whatever animal. That's the first thing. Second thing, all natural herbivorous animals, cows, goats, sheep, donkeys, deer, camels, they are pure herbivores. They must live on pasture. They must eat grass, and they must not eat grain. A little bit of properly prepared grain, fermented or sprouted, is okay to feed to a dairy herd to sustain them a little bit more because they're giving a lot through the milk. Jersey cows, for example. But that needs to be properly prepared. But 90% or more than 90% of bulk of what the cow eats must be from pasture, must be grass from pasture, hay, haylage, and grass. So that's what these cows must be. And the pasture must be organic, where there is a plethora, variety, a diversity of plants growing together in a community, because cows derive different nutrition from different grasses and from different herbs. And it's also important for them to get access to some bushes, to some trees, because they get different nutrition from trees and bushes and other vegetation. So that's the most important thing. So if a cow is locked up in a CAFO, confined animal factory operation, where she lives on standing in her own excrements and eats grain and soya all day long, the quality of her milk is not going to be what Mother Nature intended for us. That will be sick milk coming from a sick, unhappy animal. So it needs to be, first of all, native breed. Secondly, on organic, natural, diverse pasture. Not the kind of pasture that industrial agriculture provides. Some of them say, oh, our cows are on pasture. What kind of pasture? It's a monoculture of a hybrid grass that they spray with fertilizer several times a year. Then they cut it and they haul it into the kafol and they feed that grass to the cows and they call them grass-fed. These cows still never see the light of day. They never see the sun. They never put their hooves on pasture. They're still on concrete somewhere. But they're eating this hybrid, sprayed, dirty grass, unnatural. A lot of it is genetically modified too. That is not grass-fed. That is not the kind of milk we want from the animals. And once you have a real animal on a real pasture, that milk must not be pasteurized. The cows need to be milked in hygienic conditions so milk doesn't get contaminated after it leaves the animal. And it must not be pasteurized because milk of any animal is alive. It's the white blood of the female, including humans. If we started pasteurizing human milk before we give it to our babies would die in a matter of weeks. They would not live. Because what is milk coming from the woman to the baby, from the cow to her calf? It's her white blood. It's got alive and active immune cells, white blood cells, active hormones, neurotransmitters, microbes. Because the blood is a microbial community. There's lots of microbes in there, and they're essential. This is a probiotic food that comes into the baby. When we pasteurize milk, we kill it. We kill all those cells. We destroy the structure of all those hormones, proteins, active enzymes, and so on. A good example is lactose. Many people are lactose intolerant. Mm-hmm. If you drink raw milk, the raw milk contains an enzyme called lactase to digest all the lactose in that milk for you. When we pasteurize that milk, the lactase gets destroyed. So as a result, there's nothing to digest lactose for you. You become lactose intolerant. I've had so many patients, I've lost count, who lost their lactose intolerance when they switched to drinking raw milk.
Wow,
okay. Pasteurized milk.
That's what I've heard.
Dairy and dairy, and we need to understand that. Problem is, if you've been consuming dairy from the supermarkets, commercial dairy, mm-hmm. It takes about 6 months for all the debris of that dairy to leave your body. So you might have about 6 months period of time of cleansing from the dairy. And once it's left your body, then you can introduce proper dairy, proper natural, raw, organic, and we always introduce it in the fermented form, always. And in that state, in my experience, vast majority of people tolerate it perfectly well, and it brings them a lot of benefit.
Interesting. Okay. So I told you I've been on an all beef diet, and it's been almost 3 years. And that was because I couldn't tolerate anything else, including I couldn't take any pills. Like I couldn't take anything without having a flare up. And I've been a proponent of telling people to cut out dairy because it made me so ill. And I've had lots of people reach out and say, you have to try raw dairy because that can heal you. But I've been worried because I had such a terrible reaction to dairy. But your first step for people, if they're very damaged, is seal the gut by consuming animal protein and fat. And then why should they reintroduce plants if they can survive like that? Is there a benefit?
Because plants bring diversity into the diet. They bring variety, they bring color, they bring different tastes. They just bring more enjoyment.
So it's just pleasure, just from eating pleasure.
Exactly. It's pleasurable. And if they're properly prepared, then it gives variety. It makes your social life a little bit more interesting. Yeah. And it brings variety into your diet and variety of nutrition for you. But your gut needs to be strong enough to digest them. Mm-hmm. I describe the no plant GAPS diet in detail in the new book that is coming out.
Oh, that is so cool. Okay. So these people who heal their gut, they're like strict with what they eat, they heal their gut. Their first step is microbial diversity. How do you fix imbalances? Is that just with the fermented dairy?
Through consumption of fermented foods. Consumption of fermented foods and consumption of the foods properly prepared. And meat stock is extremely important. We make meat stock, not bone broth. We do not start with bone broth. There is a difference between the two. And we never start with bone broth in the GAPS diet. In the new book and in the first GAPS book, I have a whole section on how to introduce dairy safely for people who react to dairy. It's called a dairy introduction structure. You will find it there, all the guides, all the guidelines on how to introduce it. And in this book, I explain how to prepare the foods properly. We always have meat stock. That is an absolute staple of the GAPS diet. Because the meat stock, when we make it properly from the proper parts of the animal, they provide all the building materials to build a new gut wall for you, new collagen, new connective tissue, new joints, new ligaments, new bones, new muscles, new blood vessels, new nerves, everything. You rebuild your body because all of your body renews itself all the time. And we build it out of new quality materials. So you finish up after a few years, you finish up with a completely different body, not the one you had before.
Yeah. So how long, for people who are really ill, is there a certain amount of time that you've seen that they have to stay on this meat stock diet before they can start varying their diet?
It's not just meat stock. No, we eat meat stock. We eat a lot of organs. Organs are absolutely vital to eat. We eat meats. We eat fat. We eat fermented dairy. We eat eggs. And we eat fish as well. We eat fish and shellfish. So it's quite a big variety. And on the if plants are tolerated for the person, we eat a lot of plants too, properly prepared. We start with vegetables, non-starch. Starch is an absolute enemy for majority of chronic conditions. So non-starch vegetables. So start the GAPS diet, and you will find that it's very varied, and it's actually quite an easy, nourishing and delicious diet to follow. And you don't have to be cooking all the time because you can't cook large amounts. Mm-hmm. Cook in bulk, have leftovers. So you have a choice of leftovers in the fridge for yourself to warm up whenever you're hungry. So different people, how long? Different people take different time. If we're just dealing with IBS, let's say, with irritable bowel syndrome, 6 months, a year, the person is off. They can start coming off the GAPS diet. They've healed their gut, they're fine. But if we're dealing with rheumatoid arthritis or multiple sclerosis or fibromyalgia, or schizophrenia, or something very, very severe and very serious, then the GAPS diet has to be for life. Once you're on the full GAPS diet, you have a very wide range of foods that are available to you. All the vegetables are available. You can eat fruit, you can eat all the berries, you can eat all the animal foods, you eat a lot of fermented foods. Healing happens in stages, bit by bit. Eventually you reach a level where you can maintain your health, and you are healthy and well and beautiful for the rest of your life, as long as you adhere to that. And a lot of these people, when they go on holiday or when they're at a party or they're visiting friends, they can eat whatever they want. Occasionally, your body can withstand cheating, coming off the diet. You can come off it for a few days or even for a couple of weeks. But then when you come home, you go back to your normal to maintain your health. And your body will let you know whether it's ready for these transgressions or not. So you don't have to go to a party and start explaining to everything, oh, I can't eat this and I can't eat that. You can just eat what you want, whatever's there. You can enjoy yourself. But then listen to your body for the next few days. It will let you know whether that was acceptable or not. And at a certain point, it will be acceptable. You will find that you can withstand these things and you're fine.
Okay. Have you seen people have trouble with eggs at the beginning?
Yes, there are allergies to all kinds of foods people can have, but what we do, the only allergies that we respect in the GAPS nutritional protocol are anaphylactic type allergies, because they're dangerous. Anaphylactic. It's when your mouth swells and your breathing passages swell, you can't breathe, and it's life-threatening. All other allergies we ignore, unless they're extremely dramatic and very problematic. Because all other allergies, including anaphylactic allergies, are caused by the fact that your gut wall is like a sieve. It's got great big holes in it, and food absorbs and digests it. Once we heal and seal the gut wall, food starts absorbing properly digested. And all these allergies disappear one by one. I have many patients in whom even anaphylactic type allergies have disappeared. With the first few patients, we found that out by accident. When something happened, the person consumed something by mistake, and there was no reaction. So we started testing, looking at that, and even anaphylactic allergies get cancelled out by the body when the gut wall properly healed. So we ignore all these allergies and we focus on healing and sealing the gut wall, building a new gut wall for the person. And at a certain point, all these allergies disappear one by one. Of course, if you have one particular food that is causing you the biggest trouble, it's sensible to remove it for a period of time. But many people go to laboratories, start testing for food allergies and intolerances, get this list of foods, 4 pluses for this, 3 pluses for that, 2 pluses for this, start removing foods out, and they remove and finish up with virtually nothing left to eat, and they're still reacting. Because as long as your gut is like a sieve, you're absorbing everything you eat undigested, and you're reacting to it. Everything. So ignore the trial testing. I don't even recommend these tests at the beginning of the protocol. I recommend you focus on the introduction diet to heal and seal your gut wound. Then, a few months later, your body will let you know now 99% of these foods I used to react to, I'm not reacting to anymore. I'm fine with that. But there's one that I'm still problematic. So at that point, you can remove that food for a while, wait maybe 3-4 months, and then try it again and see what happens.
So your assumption for people who start on the first GAPS diet and who say are reacting to eggs or something is that eggs aren't actually damaging their gut, but at that moment it's leaking through and your body is reacting to it. So you just have to wait.
They're coming in slightly undigested. That is why the symptoms. Majority of people react to the egg white.
Yeah.
So it's that is why in the introduction diet we just start with raw egg yolks. Initially remove the whites. And in my experience, vast majority of people do not react to the egg yolk. They tolerate it perfectly well. It is a wonderful source of nutrition, raw egg yolk. So I would keep it in the diet as much as possible. Unless there is, of course, anaphylactic type allergy.
Yeah.
And I say that's the only allergy we respect.
Wow. So just I think the last question I have before I wrap up is you started this diet quite a while ago, and there must have been a huge kickback against what you were saying, especially what all autoimmune disorders are caused by one thing. People can survive on only animal foods. What was that like? Did you receive a lot of criticism?
I haven't, actually, because I haven't been fighting anyone. When I discovered the concept of GAPS, I knew instinctively, immediately, that the last people I should give this information to are the medical profession, are my colleagues. The last people, because I knew that they will stone me for this idea. So I didn't do that. I gave this information to people who needed it badly in the world. I gave it to my patients, and I gave it to the parents of children with learning disabilities, because I initially started working with autism, and then other children with hyperactivity, dyslexia, dyspraxia, other problems started coming in, and then children with allergies, and then diabetes type 1, and then adults with all sorts of problems, and that's how the whole thing snowballed. And I just gave this information to people who needed this information badly. And because I was dealing with nutrition, diet, somehow it's outside the realms of the mainstream medicine. Mainstream medicine is not interested in that. So I actually was surprisingly not attacked and left alone. And I think the majority of mainstream medicine is still blissfully unaware that these diseases can be cured.
Yes. Yeah. Otherwise, a lot of people would be out of jobs. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming on. All that information is absolutely fascinating. And that's exactly what I've experienced with my diet is couldn't tolerate anything. I slowly healed just eating meat. And now I seem to be able to tolerate a few things, but I'll probably take into consideration the raw dairy, try that out. It was just my autoimmune responses were so terrible. I had psychological problems as well, that the reactions were scary enough that I was found a diet and it works, I'll just stick with this.
You look beautiful now.
Thank you.
You look healthy and beautiful.
Thank you very much. And thank you again for coming on. Is there anywhere I can direct listeners?
I have a website called gaps.me. I have a blog, which you can find off the website. I have been training medical practitioners for more than 10 years now, and we have thousands of GAPS certified practitioners around the world. We now put the training online, so you can find the training courses on gapstraining.com. gapstraining.com. So that is for qualified medical practitioners, health practitioners, and also for not qualified people, because we now have several courses for different levels of qualifications for people who want your help. So you're welcome to have a look there and see if you would like to get trained.
Great, great. Well, thank you very much again.
That's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
And I can show you how you can start to heal yourself without money, without time.
We can end chronic disease, we can get people immune strong, we can get people metabolically fit for the first time.
This is our door out of chronic disease.
Meet Dr. Mindy Pelz, a top nutrition and functional health expert and a best-selling author. She is a recognized leader in the alternative health field and a pioneer in the fasting movement. In this video, we distill the essence of her teachings and highlight the top 6 foods she consumes to promote effective autophagy, seamlessly fitting within her fasting regimen.
Nobody cures you. You cure yourself. And so you have to start to look at the human body as this self-healing organism that's always figuring out how to keep you alive.
Let's first understand what autophagy is.
Autophagy is where the cells realize that there's no nutrients. It's nutrients and blood sugar, glucose, coming into the cell. It's like an internal mechanism where the cell goes, nothing's coming in. Okay, we got to make sure, A, that we're a better version of ourselves. So it'll push out viruses, it'll push out bacteria out of the cell. The other thing that it does is it'll say, hey, you know what? This cell's going rogue. This cell's becoming a cancer cell. This is a senescent zombie cell that's going to start to age you quickly. They're a weak member of the team. In this fasted state where no glucose is coming in, no nutrients are coming in, you're a liability and we need to get rid of you. And so it gets rid of those cells.
Autophagy is a natural cellular process in which cells degrade and recycle their own components. The term autophagy comes from the Greek words auto, meaning self, and phage, meaning eating. Essentially, autophagy is the body's way of cleaning out damaged cells in order to regenerate newer, healthier cells. So for autophagy to take place, the body needs to be in a fasted state. Then what happens in a fasted state?
What is a fasted state? And it's really when that blood sugar comes down enough that it triggers the body to switch. 8 hours, you start to make the switch. By about 12 hours, your body's now starting to make a good dose of ketones. The brain is excited, so you're getting that mental clarity. Ketones turn off the hunger hormone. So you also, when you switch over, there's going to be a point in which you're not hungry. And that all happens at about 12 hours. At 13 hours, we start to see that growth hormone goes up, which is what slows down the aging process, helps us burn fat. We also see in men, we see testosterone start to go up. 1,300% increase in testosterone with just a 15-hour time period. We see inflammation, CRP goes down, which is an inflammatory blood marker, will start to go down. In fact, one of the greatest studies ever done on women was they took a group of women after they had had traditional breast cancer treatment, and they had them just fast 13 hours every single day. And they noticed that there was a 64% less reoccurrence of breast cancer in the group that all they did is fast, was 13 hours a day. They didn't even change their food, they just fasted. So check this out. Research shows at 15 hours, we see growth hormone go up. Okay, growth hormone is the hormone that keeps you young and helps you burn fat. But if you stay in that fasted window, you keep going, 17 hours, your brilliant body turns within and it goes, wait a second, no food's coming in, we better get stronger. 17 hours, we stimulate autophagy. The cells start to repair themselves and old aging cells you get rid of. 24 hours, your whole gut resets and you get intestinal stem cells that come in and repair the whole inner lining of the gut. 36 hours, your body goes and finds that stubborn fat specifically around the belly and it starts to burn that for energy. 48 hours with no food coming in, now all of a sudden you're getting new dopamine receptor sites. Okay, why are you getting that? Because your brain has got to get motivated to go find food. So you reboot the whole dopamine system, and then 72 hours, the whole immune system reboots itself and recycles itself. That's without a drug. That's without a supplement. That's why I'm like, We have to get this out to the world. This is our door out of chronic disease.
Hello, health champions. Today we're going to talk about what would happen if you don't eat for 100 hours. And it's critical that you watch this video carefully, because if you're like most people and you don't understand what happens in the body and the very idea of skipping a meal is terrifying to you, then you'll probably never experience the amazing benefits that you can get from fasting. And these benefits include things like weight loss, reduced inflammation, increased mental clarity, reduced insulin resistance, reverse type 2 diabetes. You can detoxify the body, you can improve longevity, and even improve immunity. And all of these benefits come down to a handful of mechanisms that we really need to have just a basic grasp on. And I'm going to keep it simple for you. So we can improve insulin sensitivity, we improve hormone balance when we fast, we trigger survival genes, we can improve gut health, reduce inflammation, and reduce oxidative stress. And perhaps the most important benefit that you really can't get very much of unless you do fasting is called autophagy, and we'll get into some great detail on that. But fasting also comes with a few challenges. So the number one is fear. We're afraid of what might happen. We've been told that it's dangerous to fast. We're afraid of getting hungry. We're afraid of losing muscle and getting hypoglycemia, where our blood sugar drops too low. Where do we get nutrients if we don't eat? And of course, there may be some interruption of your social life. We also need to understand that fasting is not for everyone. Extended fasting is not for everyone. And there is also a risk that you might binge unhealthy foods afterwards. So how do we deal with these challenges? Well, it's pretty straightforward. For fear, you just have to learn the truth. If you understand how it really works, there's nothing to be afraid of, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video. Hunger, muscle loss, hypoglycemia, and nutrient deficiencies, those are things we're going to cover throughout the video. And when it comes to disrupting social life, that probably will happen, but realize that you're not going to do this type of fast like 72 hours, 100 hours, probably more than 2 to 3 or maybe 4 times a year. So during that time, you just have to figure out, hey, how do I work around and how do I plan it into my schedule if I want all these benefits? And then it's not for everyone. So for small children, pregnant women, if you have a disease condition, if you're extremely thin, then you probably want to think twice about doing an extended fast. You can still do intermittent fasting, like maybe 16-hour fasts most days. That's not a problem for anybody. But longer fasts, probably not so much. And there is also the risk that if you don't eat for a while and you look forward to food and you're used to eating all the time, then you might be binging unhealthy foods after. But it really comes down to what kind of food habits do you have. If you mostly eat junk food and you get super excited and you get into this long fast and you dream about food the whole time and you have a bunch of junk food around the house, then yes, you will probably or possibly start eating a bunch of unhealthy foods and overcompensate. But if you already have good habits and there's only good food in the house, then that is not really going to be an issue. So what happens when you stop eating, when you start fasting, is that first you lose weight. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's terrible. I knew that you didn't want that to happen, but oh well. And this is because when you don't eat, you have to use stored energy. That's the whole point of storing body fat and excess energy on the body so that we can use it when there's no food available. And the body can store 2 things for energy. It's called glycogen, which is a form of glucose or carbohydrate, and we can also store fat. So in the beginning, if your body is used to using carbohydrate primarily, then you will start using up this glycogen. And you can store about 1 pound of glycogen in your muscles and in your liver. And now something interesting though is that this glycogen is kind of like a sponge. It absorbs and binds water. So this 1 pound of glycogen is going to bind 3 pounds of water, which when you start using up the glycogen now, you'll also start releasing the water because there's no sponge there to hold the water. So as you burn through 1 pound of glycogen, you will most likely lose 4 pounds of body weight. And then gradually, as you start burning through that glycogen, you will also start using up more body fat. And then we want to understand hunger. That's probably the single biggest deterrent for people, because most of us, until we hear about this and give it a try, most of us have probably never gone a day in our lives without food. I know that was certainly the case for me, but there's two hormones, insulin and ghrelin, that we need to understand. So insulin, first of all, is involved in fat storage. Whenever we eat, our blood sugar goes up, insulin is released to take that blood sugar out of the bloodstream into the cell where some of it is used and the excess gets converted to fat. So the tendency for insulin is to promote fat storage, and not just fat storage, but lipogenesis, meaning making fat out of carbohydrate. And when we have high levels of insulin, when we become insulin resistant and we have chronically high levels of insulin, now we will have a tendency, we'll have some momentum toward fat storage. And what a lot of people don't realize is that if you have increased insulin, if you have chronically high levels of insulin, and that promotes fat storage and prevents fat burning, then you're going to be more hungry than you would be otherwise, because you store all that energy, but because of the high insulin, you have a lesser tendency to get it back. You can't really retrieve that. With high insulin, your body prefers to go and eat more. And then, of course, the opposite of that is true, that if you can lower insulin, then you can move toward fat burning. And if you can burn the fat and release those fat stores, then you actually become less hungry. So we'll come back to that. But there's also a hormone called ghrelin, and that's your hunger hormone. And typically what we think about is that ghrelin rises to make you hungry when your body is supposed to go and get food, when it's supposed to hunt something down and eat something. And then as you have satisfied your body, then this ghrelin level drops to a low level and you're not hungry anymore until it's time to eat again. But it turns out it's not quite that simple, because ghrelin is mostly habitual. So what does that mean? Well, let's say that you have ghrelin rise in the morning when it's time to have breakfast, and then you eat and your ghrelin drops and you're not hungry, and then we repeat this a few times throughout the day. That makes perfect sense, but what happens is this is mostly habitual. The ghrelin rises to make you hungry as a habit to help you eat at the times that you usually eat. So if you usually have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, then those are the times that your ghrelin is going to rise. And it's like a program in your body. But here's the really cool part, that if you get hungry and you ignore it and you just have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and 30 minutes goes by, then your ghrelin is going to drop anyway. It's not going to stay high. Your body isn't evil and mean to you. It's not going to keep you miserable. It's just trying to get you, hey, let's see if there's some food out there somewhere, because overall food is a good thing. It helps survival. But if there is no food around, it's not going to keep you miserable and keep that ghrelin high. It's going to drop down and try again later. So it's not as bad as people think just to ignore that hunger and go do something else, go for a walk, have a cup of tea, and that ghrelin will drop and you won't be hungry and you won't even think about it sometimes for the next day or so. But insulin isn't just about weight loss or hunger. In fact, it is the most important factor as far as most chronic degenerative diseases that we try to reverse with fasting. So when you have high levels of insulin, over time you become insulin resistant. And what we're trying to do then is to reverse that and become insulin sensitive. So how does fasting do that? Why is fasting unique in that regard? Well, your body wants to maintain a very narrow range of blood sugar. So when you eat something and your blood sugar goes up, now your body quickly releases some insulin to an appropriate corresponding level, and now this glucose comes back down into a normal range, and then this insulin also comes down into a normal range. And then we do that over and over. We do it one more time, and we do it maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 times in some cases. And of course, the insulin goes up and down. But then we have our last meal of the day, and we get down into this range. But then if we only fast for like 8 hours, now this doesn't have time to get very low before we eat again. And especially if you're insulin resistant, if you have high levels of insulin, then this is not going to drop back down into a good level during just a single night's fasting. But when you go beyond 8 and 12 and 24 and 36 hours, now the insulin keeps dropping for the duration of the fast. Because if you're not adding any new food, there is no reason for the body to release large amounts of insulin. It's going to level off at a baseline level where you just need enough to regulate your basic blood sugar, but not enough, not large amounts to deal with incoming food. And this is how long-term fasting, extended fasting beyond 24 hours is probably the most powerful tool to break through plateaus of high levels of insulin and insulin resistance. And when you do that, now you can start reversing type 2 diabetes. You can reverse hypertension in many cases. People try this and they say, hey, my blood sugar drops, but also my blood pressure normalized. And of course, some of the tremendous benefits would be to reduce the risk of heart disease, reduce the risk of stroke, and reduce the risk of cancer. These are the big killers of mankind today. And all of them, even though there are other contributing factors, all of them are primarily metabolic conditions that we can improve the risk by becoming more insulin sensitive. And fasting will also reduce inflammation, which, if you recall, heart disease, the primary risk factor, the primary mechanism is chronic low-grade inflammation that causes heart disease. So now we can start affecting these from many different directions. Let's look at more factors about this inflammation. So fasting can reduce inflammation, and it can do this many, many different ways. It will reduce the pro-inflammatory white blood cells. So you have all these white blood cells as part of your immune system, and sometimes it's appropriate to have more inflammation and sometimes less inflammation. But fasting tends to reduce the particular cells that promote inflammation. So overall, we get less inflammation. It can act as an immune system reset. And if your immune system has a tendency to make a lot of these pro-inflammatories, then with a reset, we can lower that chronic level of inflammation. And a lot of inflammation in the body has to do with the gut. So when you don't eat any food, now there's no food to irritate, so you reduce gut irritation, and you're also not feeding the pathogenic gut bacteria. You're feeding all bacteria less, but especially the pathogenic ones tend to like the processed foods and the sugar. But overall, you're getting a break to give your body a rest to heal that gut. And as a result, you can improve your balance of your microbiome, which can further help in gut healing. And if everything works a little better, if you have a healthier membrane, a better biome, now you can actually have less food intolerances. You can start tolerating food better, because that's really all about how well your gut is doing. It's not really you that's allergic to food. It's the whole environment in your gut that's allergic to food. But there's even more ways that you reduce inflammation with fasting. You reduce free radicals and you reduce oxidative stress when you don't eat, because Most free radicals and oxidative stress comes from processing and burning through food. Another big factor is that you're increasing ketones. When you're burning through your fat stores, your body upregulates ketones, and they are anti-inflammatory. And this also helps with mitochondrial repair. So mitochondria are little things inside your cells that make virtually all of your energy, 95% plus of all the energy that you use are actually made by a little separate entity inside your cells. And whenever you make energy, when you burn food and make energy, you create free radicals and oxidative stress. That's unavoidable. But the healthier your mitochondria are, the cleaner that happens. When you have old and sick and damaged mitochondria, it's kind of like rust. It's like an old rusty car. It doesn't burn clean at all. It just fumes and spews things everywhere. But if you can improve the health of those mitochondria and repair them now, they're going to increase their capacity to make energy, but also burn much cleaner. And then we have autophagy. So even if you don't have a disease, even if you are at your ideal weight, autophagy would be the reason to do this fasting anyway. So autophagy means self-eating, but it doesn't mean that you're going to start chewing on yourself. It's not that type of self-eating. It simply means that when there are no new resources, when you're not adding new resources to the body, especially protein, then the existing resources become so much more precious, and the body has to get better and better and better at utilizing and making the most of those resources. And as a result, it will increase its recycling ability. It will perform cellular cleanup so that it can go out in the body and look for things that are a little bit degraded, some cells that aren't so healthy, some misfolded proteins, some bacteria, anything that could be a resource. The body just starts looking really, really hard. And as a result, you actually improve your immunity, because some of these things that go out looking for things are part of your immune system, your white blood cells. And overall, you perform quite a powerful detoxification as through the mechanism of autophagy. And here's another way to think about autophagy. I'm sure you've all heard the saying, when the going gets tough, right? The tough get going. Well, when you're fasting, then it gets a little tougher. And now your body has to get much, much better. And one thing that happens is it starts upregulating human growth hormone. This is a tissue building hormone. It is a muscle sparing hormone. Any new tissue, any repair, any growth that you want to make, you need human growth hormone. And during a 3-day fast, you could actually upregulate your levels of human growth hormone many, many times. Some studies have shown like 7, 8, 10 times more growth hormone during a fast. And this brings us to one of the fears or concerns, which is muscle loss. Some people say, oh, if you don't eat protein, you're going to lose muscle. No, you won't, not short term. And 3, 4, 5 days is short term. If you go for months and months, yes, you will reach a point where your body starts breaking down muscle to turn into glucose. But muscle is the last thing your body wants to break down, because you need it. You need your muscles to propel the body and go find new food. And that's why the body upregulates this human growth hormone so dramatically, to make sure that because it's muscle sparing, you're not going to use up any muscle. You're going to use everything else first, all the debris. And as I said before, you don't really need the muscle to make glucose, because you have 5% carbohydrates stored in the fat tissue, which is plenty to work during ketosis. Another thing that increases dramatically is another hormone called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. And that's basically Miracle-Gro for the brain. And why does the body do this? Well, remember, when the going gets tough, the body gets better at everything. It needs to get better. So it needs to increase its ability to learn. It needs to increase its ability to adapt and find new solutions. And human growth hormone and BDNF are necessary for building tissue, which includes brain synapses. Anytime you learn something, it's because you rewired your nervous system. You're sending out new little tentacles that connect to other tentacles to create a neural network. And that's how we learn. So during a fast, you're actually better at learning. You're better at adapting. And one more way the body gets better is it improves survival. Fasting triggers survival genes called sirtuins. So even if you don't have a disease, these are very, very powerful reasons to do a fast now and then anyway. But a lot of people are confused about how long does it take? That's a very common question. Autophagy, when does it start? And like most things in the body, it's not like a cutoff. It's not black or white, like nothing up to this point and then it's all on. Instead, we want to think of it as gradual. Now, for the first 12 hours, you're probably not getting any autophagy, hardly at all. And then up to about 72 to 100 hours, it's going to increase to a max level and then it's going to plateau. So depending on how your diet is, if you're high carb, if you're already fat adapted, if you're in ketosis, after 12 hours, you're probably going to have very little, but after 16, it's going to start kicking in just a little bit. Now, again, on high carb, you're probably not getting anything yet. And then as time goes, 24, 48, 72, 100 hours, it gets to deeper levels. But you don't want to just think about this as how deep a level you reach, even though that's important. You want to think about how long am I in that state? Because the time there is like a multiplier. So if you're doing intermittent fasting and low carb, you're getting a little bit, probably a little bit of autophagy for a few hours every day. And that's still significant because it's every day. But if you go longer fasting, like 24 hours, that would be more like a 1 meal a day. And then as you go longer and longer and longer, now you get to deeper levels, but you multiply that level by the time that you're in that state. Now, for the average person, there is no way to directly measure autophagy. This is very complicated to do in a lab setting, but there are some simple things you can check for yourself that give you a good approximation, a good indication of where you are. And ketones is one where if you are normal and you're eating like most people, you're probably going to be 0 to 0.1. And this is ketones in millimoles per liter. And the ketone we're measuring is beta hydroxybutyrate. And there are urine strips, there are breathalyzers, but if you want to have a number that's accurate, you want to get a blood test. And you can get this yourself. You buy a little keto meter and you buy these little sticks. And my favorite is Keto Mojo because they've been around forever and they very reliable and consistent. Plus their reorder sticks are very affordable. So I'll put a link down below there. But then as you get into 12, 16 hours, it's going to depend on if you're fat adapted, if you get any readings. So the average person might be at 0.2. They might start seeing something creep up. Whereas if you're low carb or already in some level of ketosis, after 16 hours, you're probably going to start seeing 1, 1.5, something like that. And everyone's going to react differently, produce different amounts of ketones, but as a rule of thumb, just to see approximately what you might expect would be that after 2 days, you might see numbers in the 2 range, and 3 days in the 3 range, and after 4 days in the 4 range. So again, some people are going to have more or less, but just to give you an idea of where it's heading. And the other marker you want to keep an eye on is glucose. And again, it's going to start off for a healthy person, probably around 90 milligrams per deciliter. If you want to convert that to millimoles, you divide by 18 and you get 5. And then as the fast keeps going, you're going to see those markers drop, maybe 85, 80, 70, 60. Even if you get down to 50 or 40s toward the end of a fast, that's not a problem if you're feeling good. If you have symptoms of hypoglycemia, if you're dizzy, lethargic, lightheaded, then that's something that you want to keep an eye on, because if you get symptoms, then you probably want to eat. But if you're feeling okay, then it's all right for the glucose to go down, because the brain needs energy. And when you eat a lot of carbohydrate, your body's going to burn the carbs first, and your blood glucose levels are always going to be relatively high. But as you eat fewer carbs, the reason the body makes ketones is to provide an alternate fuel. And as carbs go down, ketones go up. Now, there's an even more interesting marker. It's a ratio. So if we divide the glucose by the ketones, we get the GKI, or glucose ketone index. And what we do here is we take 5 divided by 0.1, we get 50. If we take the next one, we see that we get down to 4.7, assuming that we are in some level of ketosis and we have gotten our ketones up to maybe 1. And these would be typical numbers in the beginning. So for an average healthy person who has good blood sugar control, but very, very little ketones, you're probably going to start off with a ratio at 50. And then as you start making some ketones, this is going to drop very quickly. And what they've found in some research is that for the truly, really deep levels of autophagy, you want to get that ratio down to about a 1. And in some studies, they've found if you get it down to 1, that's where you can really starve a cancer. You can even start reducing or reversing or eliminating certain types of tumors. So as your levels of ketones increase, you're going to see these numbers change pretty quick, because again, ketones go up, glucose go down. If we divide, we see faster changes. And these are pretty close to what I had last time that I did a 100-hour fast. I think I ended up with 55 or something in terms of glucose, and I think I was over 5 on ketones. But again, it's not a competition, but just roughly what you can expect to see.
Now, the one thing that we all know is 100% true is that drinking a lot of water is very good for our bodies. And dehydration is very bad for our bodies. We know that. We've been told that by everyone. But why is it that when you overwater a plant, it dies? In fact, the number one cause of plant death, plants in your house, is overwatering them. We also know that to make a really good wine, you have to not put too much water. In fact, certain really good winemakers found that if you don't overwater, if the plant or the grapevine goes through a short period of no water, the roots will go deeper and the flavor of the wine is greater. You have a lot more phytochemicals because that plant adapts. And we also know that nutrition is good for our bodies, right? You have vitamins and minerals that act as cofactors to help all the biochemistry, the biochemical reactions in our body to make us healthy. But the time restrictive eating, the fasting, also at the same time greatly benefits the biochemistry of your body. And the two main types of fasting is water fasting, okay, and dry fasting. When you do water fasting, you're basically not eating, but you're drinking liquids. When you do dry fasting, not only are you not eating food, but you're not drinking water. So that is a topic I want to touch on and just explain something that's actually quite fascinating, and you may want to consider doing a short dry fast. One of the biggest benefits of fasting is something called autophagy. Autophagy is a condition where your body is recycling damaged proteins, okay, and it's turning those into new biochemical enzymes and structural proteins, things like that, like your hair, nail, skin, bones, muscle, etc. And fasting is a potent stimulus of this autophagy. Autophagy also helps you clear out intracellular pathogens, microbes, viruses. Very interesting. Now, if we take a look at the importance of getting nutrients versus the importance of detoxification, they're pretty close as far as benefit to your overall health. And in some cases, detoxification might even be a little bit more important. One of the big purposes of sleep is to detoxify your cells. And this is why when you don't sleep, you might feel kind of very toxic and sluggish, especially in your head. Well, when you do fasting, especially dry fasting, you mimic a lot of the benefits to sleep. You're getting rid of toxicity inside your cells. Now, to explain this, I need to explain another thing. About 8 to 10% of the water that you get is produced by your own cells in the mitochondria. As the last step of the mitochondria, if you're burning fat, you're changing that fat into water and oxygen. Roughly about 8 to 10% of the water in your body is produced within your body. It's called endogenous water production or metabolic water. I mean, even in nature, animals, especially those that live in the desert, have a higher function of this. They can make water from within. And one of the big benefits of your body making this water is you get this internal water flushing from the inside out. So you enhance the detoxification process. But if you're drinking all this water, the body never gets a chance to produce this metabolic water. This is why when you do a water fast, okay, you don't get the benefits from a dry fast because you're actually drinking water. And that water inhibits the production of your own body's water. So a dry fast really is enhanced autophagy. It's just a better way of your cells taking out the trash and getting rid of all the extra metabolic waste. And the benefits are very similar to sleeping as far as the detoxification of your cells. And I think a lot of people don't realize how much extra waste that we generate in our cells through the day, especially if we're not eating well. So anything you can do to remove extra waste is a very good thing, especially for longevity. So let me just kind of summarize the benefits in a little bit more detail for you. Number one, dry fasting can help remove intracellular toxicity more than water fasting. Number two, dry fasting actually strengthens the biochemical enzyme pathways, the whole biochemistry, the machine that runs your body. Number three, and this is very, very important, most diseases are related to the mitochondria, mitochondrial dysfunction. And doing dry fasting can help improve mitochondrial function because when you go through autophagy, you also clean up damaged mitochondria, and that's called mitophagy, which is the recycling of mitochondria, as well as improving damaged mitochondria themselves. Because I would even venture to say that probably 80% of all disease, including cancer, is related to a problem with the mitochondria. If you add exercise with dry fasting during that period of time, which I'll explain the details in a minute, you can really take your mitochondria to the next level because exercise as a stimulus by itself can increase the number of mitochondria and the health of the mitochondria, as well as the capacity for the mitochondria to handle more stress and also produce more energy. All right, number four. We have different epigenetic factors, okay? Epigenetics are above your genes. The genes really do not control anything, okay? It's the epigenetic lifestyle actions like eating and even not eating. Short-term starvation or fasting is a very potent stimulus for survival. And so is cold therapy because our bodies have evolved, not in very comfortable environments, but environments that were very, very cold and environments that we didn't always have a lot of water. And so if we inhibit the production of water at certain parts of the day, it just may be very therapeutic to the cells just because we're going back to how our bodies were originally adapted. They did not involve with constant food, constant comfort, a lot of water all day long. Number five, dry fasting can mimic some of the benefits of a deep, rejuvenating sleep. I mean, sometimes I'm wondering if someone's really tired because they're tired, or are they tired because the accumulation of metabolic waste that has accumulated through the day or from some of the things that they ate. I personally know when I fast, I don't get tired as much as when I'm eating, and I feel better, and I don't need as much sleep. And even the real deeper purpose of sleep is detoxification of metabolic waste. And the last point I want to bring up is just there's not a lot of people who do any type of dry fast. And it's one thing that we're told you must always drink so much water to be hydrated. But dehydration as an epigenetic stimulus is something that I think you should just test out for yourself. Is, let's say, for example, you're fasting for 16 hours, okay, or 18 hours. Just try not to drink any water in that period of time. Then when you eat, okay, your eating window, that's when you start getting your liquids. And I do suggest you drink a lot of water, right? Like maybe 2.5 liters to get all your fluids within your eating window. Okay, now I'm not saying to force yourself to drink, but the point is that, for example, if you have a weakness with kidney stones, well, you're going to have to get more fluid in your body. But you should just see how you feel if you can go 16 or 18 hours or even 20 hours without drinking any water while you're fasting.
These are really important health tools that are not being discussed, but this is how we should be looking at health. So the first thing is we are in a crisis of health, and your health right now may not be your fault, but it is your responsibility. There are foods that are medicine, and there are foods that will build disease.
How do we know the difference?
Learn to read an ingredient label. So the first thing I do is
Interesting. Are there foods that are cancer feeding?
Yep. So there's processed meats. Sugar's a biggie. The toxic oils and donuts, juice boxes, horrific.
How important is our liver in all of this?
The most important.
Is there any symptoms of an unhealthy liver?
Yes.
How many times a day do you think we should be eating?
Great questions. And studies show us that the longer you spend not eating, the more your body heals itself. And this is why I'm such a fasting fan.
What are some of the lesser known benefits of fasting?
There's a whole bunch of them. But I'm going to say the biggest thing is
Dr. Mindy, last time we sat here, the conversation we had reached more than 10 million people across YouTube and Spotify and iPlayer and airlines and everywhere. And I was looking through some of the feedback from that conversation, and there's two of these top comments that I pulled out, which I think kind of capture the impact it had on so many people. The first comment is from a lady called Anne, and she said, Dr. Mindy changed my life. I started intermittent fasting 6 months ago after I watched this podcast, and I've dropped 18 pounds and have never felt or looked better. The second comment I pulled out was from a 57-year-old lady who said, going through menopause, morbidly obese, going through a lot of stress in my personal life, and fasting because of Dr. Mindy has finally saved me. I've been doing a 36 to 48 hour test every week to fast, and it has really bolstered my confidence, and I can now do really hard things. Thank you.
there's so much on that one. There's so much on that one. That second one. I mean, that is empowerment. Those two got empowered, but that last woman got really empowered. She did that for herself, and she knows it. As she can do hard things, she is absolutely right.
It has really bolstered my confidence, and I can now do hard things. It's not typically what you think of when you think of fasting, that it gives you confidence and the ability to do hard things in other areas of your life.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've heard you interview guests like this, and I've heard many people talk about how easy we've made life right now. You can sit on your couch and you don't even have to get off the couch and food will appear at your door, and you can control your TV, and you can call a friend, and there's so much you can do without even moving it. Life has gotten so easy that we are losing that ability to really learn how powerful we are. And for women with health, it's gotten even worse. So what I love about that comment is that she took the information, she applied it, she got a result. Kind words to me, but she deserves all the credit. And she feels different, not just physically, but emotionally, and what she's capable of. Like, those are the comments that just blow me away because only you can close your mouth and not eat.
And I guess it tells you something about yourself when you're able to do that, which is, I guess, resisting some kind of temptation,
Yep.
which is, you're building evidence with yourself that I am the type of person that has control and autonomy over my destiny. And it's
Right.
remarkable how much that must impact your professional life, your relationships, all these kind of things, your ability to put other boundaries in place in your life.
Yeah.
And it all starts with this simple discipline, which is, fasting.
Yeah.
Is that why it connects? Because it's not expensive, complicated. It's not something you need a prescription for.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, think about it. You go into your doctor's office, you have a long list of symptoms. You give those symptoms over to your doctor. He or she gives you an official title of that symptom. You're like, oh, finally, somebody understands it. And so you go and maybe you take the diagnosis, the prescription, or the treatment. You go fulfill the treatment. Let's say the drug works. You're like, the doctor was amazing, the drug was amazing. There's no empowerment in that at all. Now, if the pill doesn't work, then what ends up happening is you go back to the doctor and you're like, hey, pill didn't work. And the doctor says, okay, well, let's try a different pill. And then you try a different pill. And you do that like 3 or 4 times. And if it still doesn't work, then what happens is now you go to a different doctor. You're like, I got to go to a different doctor. This one's not working. And we keep outsourcing our power, looking for answers. Somebody show me, somebody show me. But with fasting, what happened is we showed this idea of metabolic switching where there's a time to eat and there's a time not to eat. And the longer you spend not eating, the more your body heals itself. And that concept, I think women had never really had grabbed before. And it was a tool that was so available. They could listen to to the podcast we did and apply it like an hour later. And all of a sudden, again, the only person to give credit to is yourself. And so maybe exercise. Exercise would be that tool. What other tools do we have that make you feel that powerful that quickly?
What if someone has never come across the concept of fasting before, which I think is probably quite implausible now, but can you give me the sort of like evolutionary basis for fasting? Why does it help? And where were we told a lie? Like, where did we take a wrong turn in the last 1,000 years, which made us, I don't know, just become really gluttonous and have 5 meals a day and so on?
Well, let's start with what fasting is, and then I'll dive into the lie. I have a lot of thoughts on the lie. If we go back to hunter-gatherer days, one thing that blows me away is that the human body we're living in is literally the same. It's the same as the hunter-gatherers, but what we're sitting in, what we're exposed to, the physical, emotional, chemical stressors that are handed to us every single day is completely like opposite what the hunter and gatherers were doing. So if I go back to the hunter and gatherers, they came out of the cave. They didn't have DoorDash. They didn't have a refrigerator. They didn't know how to get food. They had to go find food. Now, if blood sugar is going down, and they've got to go find food, and they pass out, 100 yards from the cave, then we wouldn't be sitting here right now. But that didn't happen. What happened is they went out to go hunt, and the longer they were away trying to find food, the more they metabolically switched into this other fuel source called the ketogenic energy system. I like to call it the fat burning system. Because what their body did, we were like a hybrid car. The body was like, okay, blood sugar's going down. Okay, time to switch over to our other fuel source. We're going to pop in and start burning fat and make a ketone. And then that ketone went up into their brain, sharpened their focus, and made them even stronger to go find food.
Mhm.
Today, we don't do that. We don't ever lean into this other system that our hunter and gatherer ancestors had to lean into. There's so much oversaturation of food and ideas and stimulation coming at us that we never had. There are like biological processes in our bodies that we're not even accessing anymore, but they exist. I think you and I talked about this last time. In the book, I talk about something called the thrifty gene hypothesis. Now, it's a hypothesis, And the idea was the humans that came out of that hunter-gatherer time had a gene that allowed them to switch over into the fat-burning system and make a ketone in the absence of food. And so all of the people that survived that time period, they morphed into what we're looking at as each other right now, because the ones that didn't have that genetic profile didn't live. So they are no longer with us. So now we're sitting with this thrifty gene inside of us, eating all day. And what they believe is happening is that because we're not accessing that gene, that the people that are suffering now is on the opposite, are the ones that are not tapping in to the fat burning system. The ones that are not accessing that are actually killing themselves because they're not in alignment with their own biology.
Kind of have a lot of empathy for them in some respects because of, it's difficult, isn't it, when we're surrounded by this much free, cheap glucose, sugar, carbohydrates
Dopamine.
to fight back against the environment you live in.
Yeah.
It's kind of what we're asking people to do. It's like fight their natural urges. Presumably the brain also has a gene which says, listen, if you see sugar,
Yeah.
you better grab it and put it in your mouth.
Yep. And there's some microbes doing that too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. There can be fungus in your gut that tells your taste buds, hey, I need more sugar because they got to stay alive.
Mm-hmm.
Our taste buds have been completely hijacked by all the chemicals poured onto our food. So we get so much dopamine now from food that sometimes all we have to do is walk into a grocery store and look at our favorite food and see it in the aisle. We haven't even picked it up, put it in the basket. We're like, ooh, that potato chip. I love that potato chip. And that's creating a dopamine response in our brain because our brain knows when I eat that, I get dopamine.
And what is the lie then? We talked about the lie that's been told to people about the food environment, about 5 meals a day, etc. What is that lie and why were we told the lie?
The biggest lie is that all food is safe. Not all food is safe. And a part of that lie is I can walk into my grocery store and it's already been vetted for my health. Now, I can tell you in America, that's not the case. We have a category of food called GRAS, generally recognized as safe in our country. And basically what the FDA can do is the FDA can put chemicals under this category when it hasn't been scientifically proven to be safe. They can repackage them and put them in this category of generally recognized as safe. The idea is that we have a innocent until proven guilty philosophy around food. And it's even gone even further where within their own administration in the FDA, people are saying that the F is silent. They don't care about the food. And then if you go even further and you think about it, how do we have food and drug together in the same administration? If we really cared about food, we would actually pull it out separate and we would have a bigger, better analysis of food. So the lie is that all food is safe. That's not true at all. There are foods that are medicine, and there are foods that will build disease. And just because we call them both food doesn't mean they're safe. You have to know the difference.
How do we know the difference?
Well, the first thing is learn to read an ingredient label. So, do you know how to read an ingredient label?
I would say no.
So the first thing I do on anything that's packaged is I go straight to the ingredients. And this is so easy. All you've got to do is look at those ingredients and ask yourself, do I know every single one of those ingredients? And if you don't, entertain yourself and go look them up. I actually did this with my nephew years ago. He brought me some frozen waffles and he's like, hey, what do you think? Are these safe? And I said, read them out loud to me. And he started to read them out loud. He was like 14 years old at the time. He started to and he couldn't get through like the third ingredient in was a chemical. And he's like, I don't know how to pronounce this. I said, go look it up. I want you to Google it and look it up and tell me what it is. And he came back and he's like, wait a second. What I just found is that's a cancer-causing chemical. I said, yeah, you're right. It is. That's what's happening, is that these chemicals are allowed in our food that promote disease. And so then once you have that idea and you know the ingredients are the most important and you follow, is it a chemical? Is it a real food? Then the next thing you can do is really stay away from anything with an ingredient label. Like when you go into a grocery store, walk around the outside. Don't go into those middle aisles. Go to the refrigerated sections. Go to the fresh food. If it doesn't have a label, it means it's authentic self. So they didn't denature it. They didn't change it. It came from the earth, or it came from an animal, whatever your ethos is around there. But it wasn't put into an altered state. Because what they do is they put these things into altered states so that they taste better, and they hijack your taste buds so you'll come back for more. Or they put it into an altered state so that it can last longer on the shelf. And if it lasts longer on the shelf, that chemical's lasting longer in you.
The lie around frequency of eating. Because, when I grew up, I breakfast, lunch, you might have something, a couple of snacks, and then have dinner. And then you wake up the next day and go through the same routine of just basically eating every waking hour of the day that you can and snacking in between. Who told us this lie? And is it a lie? Because it kind of seems to be the antithesis of fasting.
Yep. Well, from what I can find, and I'm sure there's lots of ways we've perpetuated this lie, but breakfast is the most important meal of the day was a ad slogan for Kellogg's Corn Flakes back in the 70s. So back in 1970, they had a hot new cereal, and the ad was, eat it, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Here we are in 2024, and people are still perpetuating that ad slogan. So I've actually looked into the research on, if I eat more, will it speed up my metabolism? From what I can tell from the research, I can't find that. Now, let's say we just leave the research out of it. I would like to meet a human that has eaten 6 meals a day and found that was a metabolism stimulator. I don't know very many people that say that. So it's like a cultural lie that just got sort of passed down. And what happened when the fasting research came out, now, people like Walter Longo, people like Sachin Panda, big fasting researchers, what they figured out was, oh, wait, if we compress our eating into a certain time period like our ancestors did, and we left longer for fasting, there's something magical going on here. And those were the giants that started to show us that actually time-restricted eating is the most important thing that we can be doing when it comes to food.
What about calorie-restricted eating? And is that the same thing?
No. Thank you for asking that. So let's talk about both of them in an everyday kind of scenario. So in time restriction, you are saying, I have a certain time in my 24 hours where I eat, I compress my eating window, and then I have a time where I'm fasting. So I have an eating window and I have a fasting window. Okay, and I get to decide how compressed that eating window is and how long that fasting window is. The longer you go in the fasting window, what you're doing is you're turning on these different healing mechanisms. And that is independent of calories coming in or not coming in. That is dependent on nutrients not coming in. That is dependent on glucose going down and switching over to burning fat so you make a ketone. That has nothing to do with calories. When you come over to calorie restriction, you're saying, I'm going to have X amount of calories a day. I'm going to output X amount of calories, and I'm going to do that all day long. So very different philosophies to me. You're creating an internal mechanism with time restriction that is going to stimulate a healing process. And it's nutrient deficiency along with glucose drop. It doesn't have to do with calories.
And diet is one of those things that the consequences of a bad diet, making bad dietary choices, is kind of invisible today. You might not feel great, or you might get a little bit of a stomachache or whatever, or feel a bit bloated, but it's almost like sowing seeds for your 100-year-old self that, you don't yet see the consequence of. And this is why I think diet has to become a bit of a religion to some degree. But you don't see the internal damage. You don't see the shifting of your gut microbiome on a daily basis.
Oh, I used to say this all the time to my patients. I would say, everything you're doing with your lifestyle now is preventing you from diseases you never knew you were going to get, because you'll never get them. So you didn't even know that the 5 a.m. workout that you chose to get up and go do is going to actually save you from Alzheimer's 20 years from now. You have no idea the fasting lifestyle that you committed to is actually going to save you from some kind of hormonal cancer. Like the list, it goes on and on because you're doing it today to prevent tomorrow. And so there's no like reward on that front because prevention doesn't come with like a ribbon.
How long do I have to fast for in order to metabolically switch?
Yeah, so 8 hours is usually what they say where the system starts to move from sugar burner to fat burner. It usually takes about 4 hours to get over there. So we always say 12.
For additional hours?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, well, yeah, thank you for pointing that out. So 12 hours. And now you're pretty much over into this fasting window. Your intelligent body, what it's doing is it's saying it's been 12 hours. Glucose hasn't gone up, and we haven't had any nutrients. Well, we're going to switch into our other fuel source, and we're going to burn fat to make a ketone. So everybody's a little different because some people don't switch as easy. Some people take a little longer to make a ketone. I mean, we saw some incredible hurdles that people hit trying to get into the fasted state that were because what I call their metabolic switch was sluggish. They had never really practiced this before. And so it didn't, when they were going 12 hours, all of a sudden they weren't making a ketone and they were just hungry. And so what we started to do is teach them things like, okay, this is a large reason why the new book is around, is because I needed to create a food manual to help them clean up their food system so they could switch over into the fasted system much easier.
You must have so many people that listen to your work, read your books, and then they still can't do it. They still can't fast. They still get beaten by the hunger craving that comes at 11 p.m. and then the next day at 8 a.m. It
Yeah.
just wins. It just keeps winning. And they're listening to you over and over again, but the hunger cravings, the sugar cravings just keep winning, and they just keep failing at this idea of fasting.
You know, it's funny because maybe I just don't see it as much. I mean, we've get hundreds of thousands of comments across our socials, every week. And I try to keep a pulse on them. But so I may not see maybe the people who can't fast, maybe they don't leave comments even. So, but there was a really interesting study called the Every Other Day diet. And the Every Other Day diet, this is years ago, was a researcher who took a group of people who were in a metabolic crisis. And like their cholesterol was high, their hemoglobin A1C was high, their liver enzymes were off, blood pressure. I mean, everything was bad. And they were eating the Western standard diet. And she said, you can eat whatever you want, but you're going to do it every other day. So one day, go to town. One day, you're not eating at all. You're fasting all day. And then the next day, go to town, eat whatever you want, and then you're fasting. And you're going to do this for a year. And so they ended up doing it for a year. Now, I want to point out there was like a third of the people that dropped out.
Of course. Yeah.
So we have to point that out. But everybody that stayed in it, at the end of the year, all their metabolic markers improved. They lost weight. But the thing that shocked the researchers the most is that their taste buds changed. What they craved changed. So when they hung in there and they did it over a period of time, all of a sudden they went from craving a hamburger and fries to craving a salad with some protein on it. And that was very unconscious. And I've thought a lot about that study and why did that happen? And I believe it happened because of the microbiome changes. Our taste buds are not always a brain decision. Sometimes they're a microbe decision. And if I have a set of bad bacteria because I've been feeding bad bacteria, these toxic foods, then yeah, I'm going to keep craving it. And yeah, this gets difficult. But if I stick with it long enough, if I keep fasting and trying it and experimenting with it, and I make enough progress that I can change my microbiome, then there's a door in because now my food cravings can start to change.
How does fasting change your gut microbiome in that situation?
This is a great question. So, one of the biggest criticisms of fasting is it destroys your gut. So I want to unpack this one. So here's what the science is showing. When you are in a fasted state, The longer you're there, the most famous study was out of MIT, 24-hour fast. You started to get these stem cells into the gut that repaired the gut. But when you're in a fasted state, these bad bacteria get starved out. And when they get starved out, there's an opportunity. Now, here's what I want to say, because the criticism is that fasting destroys your gut microbes. So first, yes, it destroys the ones you no longer want. Now, second thing is that first meal matters. That first door into your food matters. And if you bring in probiotic, prebiotic, polyphenol foods, my favorite thing to break a fast with for years was an avocado with sauerkrauts and hemp seeds on top of it. If you bring all of that in, now you're actually feeding those good bacteria, and you're helping them grow.
But do the good bacteria die as well when I starve them?
Some of them can, for sure. There can be an overall depletion, for sure.
But what you're saying is you're like killing a lot of bacteria in the gut potentially, but then you're feeding the good ones.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So we can't, this is, again, why Eat Like a Girl came about, because of these kind of questions. Was what happened was that so many people were just, doing 6 meals a day, calorie counting, trying to manipulate their food. And then when they discovered, wait a second, I need to think about the timing of my food, not necessarily the quality of, what I'm eating, and they switched over, all of a sudden they started to drop weight.
But the thing you broke your fast with, the sauerkraut, etc.
Yeah.
If I just started eating that, wouldn't the bad bacteria die anyway?
But because you would change the balance, hopefully, where good bacteria would grow and bad bacteria would be outnumbered at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's possible. Yeah.
I
think that's the slower way. I'm going to be really honest.
I guess the counterpoint would be then that it's hard to do that because I'd still be getting the cravings from the bad bacteria.
Yeah.
Those bad bacteria would still be sending me signals through my gut microbiome to eat hamburgers.
Yeah. We see microbiomes change within weeks. Food cravings change within weeks. If you just stick with this and then you look at that first meal matters and you make sure you're getting those sauerkrauts, you're getting hemp seeds was another one I put on that avocado all the time. Great prebiotic. Mm-hmm. So if you make that first meal really good quality and you feed those microbes, then this is a much faster way. The every other day diet, I want to say it was about 6 months that they started to see food changes happening. Because it wasn't until the full year was completed that they started to actually see the food changes that happened.
To close off on this point of fasting, then, what are some of the lesser known benefits of fasting that people don't typically think about? Because we think about weight loss. I think that's probably the number one reason why people start fasting, because they want to burn belly fat. Is that accurate from what you've seen?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the research is really interesting that 36 hours into a fast, the body goes and starts to burn specifically belly fat. Now, that research was done on, just so we're clear, 36 hours followed by 12 hours of eating, and then 36 hours of fasting followed by 12 for 30 days. And they started to see waist circumference go down. Mm-hmm. I'm not telling people to fast that way, but I think it is surprising when you go into these longer fasts how you can unstick weight. But to answer your question, I'm going to say the biggest thing is mental health. Biggest, mental clarity, happiness. And I believe that's because ketones do several things. They can start to, when a ketone comes on, inflammation is coming down, hunger is coming down, and it supercharges the brain. So now there's this intense brain clarity that's kicking in because a ketone, let's go back to our hunter-gatherers. The ketone, when it shows up, you're finding food. And you better go find food immediately. So your focus has to completely sharpen so you can be the best hunter possible. So now when we're doing that in a day-to-day kind of life, that ketone, we're not hunting, but we might be working. We might be in an interview. And so that sharpened focus is so amazing. And then the other piece I really like about the ketone is with it brings GABA. And so GABA calms you.
What's GABA?
So GABA is a neurotransmitter. And when ketones go up, GABA follows. So again, let's go back to our hunter and gatherer friends. When ketones are up, I'm focused, I have clarity, I'm hunting for food, and I better stay calm because I need to go find food.
On the point of women and fasting, I think you said to me last time that women shouldn't be fasting when they're on their periods.
The week before their
The
period.
week before
Yeah.
their period, okay.
Yeah.
So in the lead up to their period, they should be avoiding fasting. Why is that again?
Yeah. So let's go through the hormones, because I think this is one. You asked me what has surprised me on the book coming out. I'll tell you the other thing that surprised me. How many women don't understand their hormones? Like, you're controlled by it, your behaviors, your sleep, your interactions with human, and we don't have a system that's teaching women hormones. This is appalling. So when we look at the 3 sex hormones, when it comes through the lens of fasting, estrogen, which comes in the front half of a woman's cycle, does really well with fasting because she likes you to be insulin sensitive. A great example of this is the growing number of cases of polycystic ovarian syndrome, where we are seeing insulin resistance leading to infertility because of an imbalance in the estrogen system, and we're seeing an increase in testosterone because of this insulin system being off. So we need, when estrogen comes in, a tool to help women to be insulin sensitive. Progesterone's her twin sister. They look the same, we call them the same, but she acts exactly opposite. She wants glucose to be higher. She doesn't do well with cortisol. Cortisol comes in, she's gone away. I always say when progesterone goes high, cortisol is shy.
And cortisol is the like stress hormone.
Yeah. So in a woman's 30-day period, you have moments where estrogen is making her peak, and you have moments where progesterone is making her peak. So if she's on the keto diet, if she is in calorie restriction, if she is fasting all the time, she's not honoring the rhythms of these 2 hormones. And that is a major problem. So we say don't fast the week before your period because you need glucose to be higher and you don't want cortisol to be high. And just like exercise increases cortisol, so does fasting.
So what's going to happen if you fast the week before your period? What's the consequence?
Yeah. So what we have typically seen is women lose their cycles.
Okay.
You need progesterone. So let's put it through the lens of a woman's brain. Around day 20, like progesterone's building. She has to peak. And then when she hits a peak, the uterine lining sheds and you have a period. Okay, if you are fasting during that time and you didn't bring your glucose up high enough, progesterone may not peak, and then you don't have that shed of blood. When you shed every single month, that menstrual blood that comes out, there are 4 major chemicals in them. There are phthalates, there are parabens, there are forever chemicals, and there are plastics. They can actually measure that in a woman's menstrual blood. So if she's not bleeding, then she's not detoxing.
Because those 4 chemicals are toxic.
They're toxic, yes.
What do you say to those people that don't have menstrual cycles, and they're, because listen, obviously I've never been through that myself, but I have a partner who's been very open. I think she did a post last week on her Instagram describing the journey that she went on to try and get her menstrual cycle back, and she successfully has now.
Amazing.
She's 31, she's the same age as me now. And she had, many years where she had an inconsistent or non-existent menstrual cycle. And I got to observe firsthand how frustrating, saddening, confusing that is, and how you feel like you're broken in some way if you're not having a menstrual cycle as a woman. So what do we offer those women?
Well, I applaud your girlfriend for doing that. I first want to say that, like, getting your cycle back, not only just for pregnancy, but for general health it's brilliant. Like, so smart to do that. I think a lot of women think it's great they don't have a menstrual cycle. That's a little bit in the culture right now. So to those women who feel like this is a blessing they don't have a cycle, I'd ask them to rethink that. Even if they don't want to have kids, let's rethink it, because your body needs to shed every single month. So there's that. for the other women that are struggling to get their periods, the first thing that, and I'd be curious if your girlfriend discovered this, is that we have to realize that a woman's body is rhythmic. It has times where we can be outgoing and we can conquer the world, and there's times we're going to sit on the couch and do nothing. And there's times that we're really happy, and there's times don't look at us that way because our hormonal system is agitated. So we are constantly in a state of rhythm. And when you're not shedding, you're missing a major part of your rhythm that makes you a woman. To the women in the company, what they need to know is that day that like everything is crashing down on you and your stress is coming from all different angles, and you have to get up and push through on that day, and it's day 25 of your menstrual cycle. If it is appropriate on that day for you to stay home and you work in a company like this that is no questions asked, then stay home and nurture yourself. And be aware that every moment a woman is pushing through that week before her period, she is destroying her hormonal system. Now, there are little pushes through and there are big pushes through. So I'm talking about the big pushes through. I'm not talking about the moment you wake up and you're like, yeah, it's going to be a boring day. Or there's some difficult conversations I have to have today. I'm talking about the moment when your energy's down, you have brain fog, you might be having some cramps, you might be really irritable, and you're like, I can't take one more thing. How about I have this really cool company I work for. What if I just nurture myself today and take care of myself so I can show up tomorrow a better person?
Tell us, what is dry fasting and how does it work to heal people?
Yes, I know it sounds very alarming, the concept of dry fasting. I know that it does to the Western listener. And what it is a radical abstinence from food and water for an extended period of time that the body acclimates to by slowly working up towards. And it puts the body in a state of radical autophagy so that it can actually eat its own diseased tissues and clear cellular debris in the body. And so the importance of it, the important part is that these must be consecutive days. So 9 days is what, and nights are what the doctor who I found considers to be a medical dry fast that can clear the body of disease. And so you can't cheat and say on day 4 you just want, have a sip of tea or something, because then you're kicking the body out of this autophagy. And so although we've all heard that the body cannot survive more than 3 days without water, I can tell you that this is a myth. And although one should never, ever, ever attempt this at home, right off the bat, a 9-day dry fast, it's out of the question. If one follows the protocol and reduces food and reduces, supplements, etc., and tapers off, and then does a series of, say, water fasts and then shorter dry fast, then it is absolutely possible to have miraculous success with what my doctor calls natural surgery. And that's what worked for me.
Why doesn't it burn off? You talked about autophagy, which is the self-eating. Is that what or self-killing? I'm not sure what the derivative is. Self-eating. So it's the body, basically, as you said, eating the bad cells, which is the concept of chemotherapy, except for chemotherapy also kills the good cells too. When you're dry fasting, how do the good cells survive so that you don't kill all cells?
Right. Well, Alexandra, chemotherapy is a foreign agent introduced into the body, whereas this is using the body's inherent natural DNA, which is highly sophisticated. So the body goes through this very sophisticated process of putting the organs on rest, preserving the healthy cells, and the body knows what is foreign to it. So it's this very elegant, sophisticated procedure of, the digestive system is going on rest. Whatever is left undigested is worked on first, and, muscles, etc., the intent is to preserve them. And the body gets to work into what doesn't belong there, the cellular detritus, the disease cells and tissues. So it's a really elegant process. And I came up with this sort of slogan, or well, the body is its own doctor. And so as I was going through it, I would just say, okay, I will just surrender. Body, you can be the doctor and do the work. And it was truly miraculous to me too, Alexandra and Dotsie, that I had been putting thousands of pills into my body for so long, and that my solution was to take everything out of my body. That was unfathomable to me, that it could be such a simple solution as that. When I did discover it, I knew at that point I had nothing to lose, and it sounded very intriguing to me. Scientifically, I was well versed in autophagy, and I wanted to give it a try.
The most dangerous way to lose weight. When you mimic starvation by doing a fast, you trigger all these different genes that not only help you lose more weight and burn fat, you also live longer, you have better cardiovascular, better blood sugars. But my question is, way in the past, when we had a famine and adapted to it through these genetics, didn't we also have a drought? If that's true, don't we have genes that also protect us against dehydration? I looked it up, and the answer is absolutely. There's over 50 different genes that protect us and also produce a lot of health benefits, including decreased risk for cancer and all sorts of things. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Wow, dehydration is dangerous, and we need water. Because by the time we're thirsty, it's too late. We're already dehydrated. You ever hear that? I stumbled on this amazing study I want to share with you. It was on little birds that can fly across the desert without water and just survive. And there was a study, and the first group, they fed them food and water. The second group, no food, just water. And the third group, no food and no water. That's called dry fasting. And the results blew me away. The dry fasting group generated 6 times more water than the group that only drank water. The dry fasting group also burned more fat. But when fat is burned with oxygen from the air, the chemistry of it turns it into water. I think we can use dry fasting to our benefit. 12 hours of dry fasting for 30 days. There's a lot of research into that area that shows a lot of health benefits and not many problems, not many side effects, if any. So when we're talking about short-term dry fasting, I'm only talking about 12 hours and maybe 20 hours to start out. I'm not talking about some long dry fast, okay? But I first want to tell you where this whole water thing came from as far as people pushing water on you. It's actually developed from a campaign when the government partnership with certain corporations called Drink Up. Don't drink the tap water. We must have bottled water. So the companies that sell bottled water are behind those campaigns. And they basically educated us that we need to drink more water because dehydration is the most dangerous thing. Well, if that's true, then we should also never go without food. We should probably eat every hour and be nourished. What's interesting about the water bottling companies, the top 3 companies, Nestle, Coke, and Pepsi. Same companies that sell, ultra processed foods and liquid candy or soda pop, energy drinks with a lot of sugar. They basically have markets on both sides, right? They have water side and also the junk food side. So listen, I'm not against water. Just drink when you're thirsty, but you may want to look at this dry fasting as an extra tool to use when you need to. Let's dive into the details of this. There's some rules. You want to go slow. Okay, you don't want to just jump into fasting right away because you want to first adapt to fat burning. So you want to get on a lower carb diet for a while to make it easy on you. That's going to get things ready for you to do the fast. Your shift over to burning more fat. And then when you transition into fasting, it's like really easy. You have no cravings, your hunger goes away, and it makes it doable. If you do fasting, you always want to start with the water fasting, okay, before the dry fasting. So with water fast, you're taking supplements like electrolytes, B vitamins, sea salt. With dry fast, you're not consuming any electrolytes, any pills, you're not drinking coffee, you're not doing anything with water. And your body will start to adapt and hold on to the salt and water as much as it can with this shift in hormones. But I'm telling you, a lot of people have never got their body into a state where they're actually making water. But then you want to kind of graduate into the dry fast on a very small little level that's fairly easy, but I think it can produce massive results even if you do it in a smaller scale. Why? Because 1 day of dry fasting is equal to 3 days of water fasting. Some other things that you want to do is stay in a cool environment. Don't make the mistake I made by spending a lot of time outside sweating. You don't want to do that because that's going to really dehydrate you even more. Now, I did fine, but I can tell it was just too much stress because listen, when you're dry fasting, you're turning off your digestion. Your kidneys are not having to work hard. So all of this resource that your body has can switch to repair, healing, regenerating, fixing stuff. So we don't want to necessarily be adding high intensity exercise. You can walk. You don't want to be sweating and doing work outside that's involving more dehydration. Okay, I made that mistake, so don't do that. And also, when you get into the longer fast and you refeed, you want to just do liquid type stuff a little bit, maybe 8 ounces every 4 hours for the first day, the second day, and the third day. This is more for a longer fast, but I just want to let you know that you want to really gradually introduce your food slowly. Kefir is good to help fortify the gut. Bone broth is good. But this video is just to kind of give you another tool to potentially use to help you lose more weight by putting your body in a state where it can only get water from fat. So it's forced to burn more fat. So I think the first step you should do is to learn how to do the ketogenic low carb diet.
Welcome to Life Club. This is George G, and the time is right. Welcome to today's guest, strong and powerful, Michelle Slater. Michelle, are you ready to do this?
I am ready, George.
All right, let's go. Michelle struggled with Lyme disease for years. It suffered so greatly, she actually considered assisted suicide. In her last-ditch effort, she traveled to Siberia to work with the world's leading dry fasting expert. Her newest book is Starving to Heal in Siberia. Michelle, excited to have you on. Tell us a little bit about your personal life, some more about your journey, and I guess what motivated you to write the book and what you're hoping people get out of it.
Thank you for having me, George. I appreciate being on the show. And yes, I'm very excited that the Starving to Heal has just come out yesterday. And it's been quite the journey because I never intended to write a memoir or self-help book on recovering from Lyme because I was a healthy person who had a full life and I was very productive before I got sick. So I was a university professor and I ran marathons, I skied, and I went hiking all over the world, and then I went from that to just lying flat in my bed. And after being there for some years with what became late stage Lyme disease, when I recovered, and I know we'll talk about that, I wrote the book because I had been in such a state of despair to the point that I had been on the verge of committing assisted suicide. And when I learned of this radical methodology and thought, well, I really don't want to commit suicide, but this body is no longer inhabitable. So I tried it. And when it led to my complete recovery, I thought, I cannot keep this to myself. It's radical. People may not understand it, but I have to write a book about it so that I could possibly help as many people as I could who are suffering from not only late-stage Lyme, but also chronic fatigue, mystery illnesses, autoimmune disorders, and there are a lot of them out there, George. So I thought I have a moral obligation to write this book.
I that totally makes sense. I was going to say I identify with that, but that's not possible. So that certainly makes sense. I remember hearing about Lyme disease for the first time, I think in 2001 or 2. It was somebody that I'd met through business, and their wife had been struggling with it for a really long time. And now you hear about it, and it's a terrifying disease because it seems like it's always just people can't diagnose it.
That's exactly right. It is terrifying for multiple reasons. Diagnosing it is difficult. There is the classic bullseye rash
Yeah.
the CDC says 70% of people get it, but the truth is that so many people don't get it, and the ticks are so microscopic, and so I didn't get the classic bullseye rash, and so yes, and then the testing itself is so sensitive that some people test negative, but they're positive. So it depends on the test that you take. And then they call it the great imitator because there are so many symptoms that it can mimic other diseases. So it's hard to actually diagnose the Lyme itself. So it does become, and then by that point, if you haven't diagnosed it, it's become chronic, and then it becomes even more difficult to eradicate. So it is a very challenging disease. And unfortunately, there are more and more people getting it every year. I think about 440,000 people per year contract Lyme disease.
Wow. So it is, wow, a super sneaky, efficient illness. And
Yes.
is it an autoimmune disease? Or what is Lyme disease?
So it itself is, a vector-borne disease. It is not considered to be an autoimmune disease in itself. However, because it weakens the immune system and the body is constantly fighting it off, and these spirochetes that embed into the body are egregious, so it leads to a compromised immune system. So in addition to having the Lyme disease, I actually developed an autoimmune disorder, and that is very typical for patients with chronic Lyme, late stage Lyme. So the Lyme led to an autoimmune disorder. In my case, it was psoriasis, which is one of the known disorders. So I then had to combat that as well. But my treatments cleared all of that up, to my astonishment. So I have no trace of an autoimmune disorder. I have no trace of Lyme disease, and I have not for 5 years.
Amazing. So you mentioned that you were essentially bedridden. I'm sure horrible pain and discomfort. Does it eventually kill people?
Many people, it's controversial about what the death is actually coming from, but there are many people who die from complications of Lyme. There are also, it's the Journal of Neuropsychiatric Disorders reported recently that about 1,200 patients commit suicide a year because of these inflammation-inducing cytokines that cause depression in Lyme patients. And then there are major complications from Lyme disease. So yes, it absolutely does. My joint pain was so severe that I couldn't put my hands around a steering wheel, to say nothing of even picking up a book. I wasn't able to read. I had severe migraines. I'd never had a history of headaches before. I had such memory issues. I would begin a sentence and I had no idea
Oh my
what I
God.
was talking about. I couldn't finish the sentence. And just, and then other symptoms, tinnitus, tachycardia, night sweats. I couldn't really walk very well. Sometimes I would slide down on my bottom from my bedroom to get to the kitchen, and then I would be so tired I would just lie in a heap at the bottom of the stairs until I could get to the kitchen. So it was not a sustainable life, and I know that there are a lot of people out there who have that experience.
And so you're Googling or trying to figure out what can I do, and you learn about this program in Siberia.
Yes, and I had employed all of my tools. I have a PhD from Johns Hopkins. I'm a trained researcher. This whole experience for years, I had been researching, as a sick person who didn't really have, the wherewithal to conduct proper research. I would try everything that I could try. So this wasn't the first thing I had tried. I had exhausted a whole variety of modalities, from allopathic to alternative medicine. So yes, on that day, which I will never forget, I can remember what I was wearing, what it looked like, the time of day, where the pillows were positioned in my bed around me. And I came across, yes, this interesting phrase and a forum for patients with autoimmune disorders. And it talked about the work of this Dr. Filonov in Siberia, an MD, who said that, the cells in the body can turn into like thermonuclear reactors and incinerate diseased cells.
Mm,
And somehow that seemed logical to me.
sure.
And just like I incinerate diseased cells was like, yes, this is what we need to do. It might be magical realism, but let's find this doctor. So then I went on a quest to find the doctor and go to Siberia.
It's like literally it's like the hero's journey. You're venturing out into the unknown to meet the figurative Yoda out in Siberia. What is this human being doing in Siberia?
That's precisely right. It is the hero's journey, George. So he's from Siberia.
Huh.
He comes from a family of medical doctors in a part of Siberia that, it doesn't look like tundra. It's in a very beautiful part, UNESCO protected part in the mountains. It's a luscious landscape with beautiful rivers and mountains, songbirds, the tall pines. So it's this very peaceful sanctuary-like setting. And this happens to be, where he is from, and he believes that it's a favorable condition for the patient to be in nature, away from the city, while conducting these dry fasts. So he has a rustic clinic there. So that's his place.
Amazing.
That it's conducive to healing.
Was it hard for you to go there? I mean, just with I don't have any idea if an American could just go to Siberia.
Yes. Well, at this time, unfortunately, circumstances don't permit that, but he does conduct fasts in Western Europe and in Turkey, where, everyone seems to be able to go. I did have to renew a Russian visa that I already had, and my partner at the time had to literally pick up my body from my bed and sort of haul me to Siberia, which involved several flights and a long car ride, and then even navigating some backcountry roads to arrive there. Once I arrived, it felt like I was in the scene of some fairy tale with the doctor's wife is running through this sort of field calling my name, and I was like, I have arrived.
Amazing.
So yes, it was not easy to get there.
And so I don't even know what dry fasting is.
A lot of people don't. It's the primary question. So dry fasting means to abstain from all substances, including water. So absolutely nothing is ingested during a dry fast. And actually, one does not even take a shower, brush one's teeth, apply lotions or creams, because all of that could provide an external power supply to provide nutrients for the body. So I call it a practice that's similar to marathon training. So you work the body up to being able to undergo extended dry fasts. And I like to say right away that no one should try this at home today, feeling miserable in bed and saying, well, I'm going for it. This is not how it's done. Dr. Filonov is on drfilonov.net. He does Zoom consultations with people all over the world with a translator now, really largely thanks to me coming as the first American patient and then writing a blog, and all of a sudden there was a flood of people, and he organized and now does Zoom consultations with a translator. But the dry fasting itself, the body has this as a known process. It's an ancient practice. So the body knows what to do. It sort of becomes its own doctor and goes into this sophisticated process of recycling compromised cells and renewing, blood cells and recycling cellular debris.
What was your, just sort of in general terms, what was your diet like before going there?
So that's an excellent question, because as I said, one doesn't just simply dry fast. Dr. Filonov likes to have 3 months to prepare a patient. So my diet was already very clean. I've always had a very clean diet. So, organic vegetables, very plant-based. But I've reduced portions, absolutely, no sugar. I never was, I had long known that, white bread, etc., was a no-no. So it was very, healthy, plant-based. I avoided caffeine, alcohol. But what he did, I had always been trying to put all these supplements in my body, and I never thought of this elegant solution of what I could take out of my body. So he took me off all medications, all supplements, and he had me employing some simple things like activated charcoal to reduce the effects of all of these medications I had taken for so long. So I had a very simple diet, and then he put me on short dry fasts. So I did a 1-day dry fast, I did a 3-day dry fast at home before I went to Siberia. And I'd already been juice fasting, water fasting really since I was a teenager. So I was no stranger to that process. So I did his preparation before I spent 2 months in Siberia with him.
And those 2 months.
And those 2 months with him saved my life.
Yeah. What was the longest dry fast that you did?
The longest dry fast that I did when I was very sick, because I now do maintenance dry fast, not for Lyme disease, but because he counsels all of it. He says it's a toxic world.
Yeah.
All of people should be dry fasting. Everyone should be dry fasting. So the longest one I did when I was sick there with him was 9 days. And the important thing about it, so I first did a 7-day, and then he rehabilitated me with the exit. And it's very important, of course, not to overdo it in the exit. And then we did the longer 9-day. And what he says, it's, you can't cure a disease with a 2 or 3-day dry fast. It has to be cumulative days. Those cumulative days, the body is working up to this, really powerful mechanism of sorting through the cells. The organs are resting, the healthy cells are preserved, but it's going through this really sophisticated process, and it takes time. So he says the 9th day is the most important day. So you have to make it to the 9th day with no food and no water, which I was able to do.
Yeah. Amazing. So you were accustomed to doing fasting when just growing up or whatever before you got sick. 9 days. Could you have done 20 because you were so sick?
No. I want to be very clear for the listeners out there that there are social media accounts circulating in the US about these long 20-day dry fasts. This is very dangerous, and the human body should not undergo ever more than 11 days. And Dr. Filonov would never allow a patient to go past 11 days. What he would do instead would be to do a 7-day dry fast, then a 9-day, take a few weeks off, and do another 9-day. And that's the safe way to practice this. And he has been using these treatments for 30 years. So he observes the patient. This patient is under medical supervision. He would never approve of a 20-day dry fast. So I'm so glad that you asked that question.
And I just pulled the number out of the air. I've never heard of a dry fast before our conversation today. It was more from my perspective of, would you have done anything to get better?
I would have.
From a psychological standpoint.
If I knew that it was safe, and I did put a lot of trust in him because I could tell he's very wise, he's very logical, he's very rational, and I can see that, he makes very careful decisions with his patients. And so I did put myself in his hands. And I thought, none of these symptoms I have while dry fasting, a little bit of thirst, a little bit of fatigue, nothing is worse than my Lyme symptoms. And I was so motivated to get better. And surprisingly, I felt increasingly better as I kept dry fasting. It was like my body was burning off this junk, so to speak, in vernacular. And I felt better as the days progressed while I was still dry fasting, which to me was miraculous.
Yeah.
And when I came out of it, I really felt like I had been put back into my 17-year-old body. I was just like bouncing, and my memory, I had no idea that these things would come back. And, I went on to write 4 books in the last 5 years. There's, in the process of coming out. This is the first one to come out. But I spent the whole summer this year hiking through the Swiss Alps with my daughter, and, I'm running every day. And I have this really high energy like I used to have. So that to me is the reason why I need to put this out there.
Yeah, I think it's incredible, and I'm so happy that it worked, obviously,
Thank
and
you.
and that you've got your life back. So
Yes, thank you. I'm
amazing.
grateful for that every single day.
So when people pick up the book and read it, what are you hoping that they'll get out of it?
Well, I want them to understand that there's hope if you're in despair. I want them to see it's also a sort of a love letter to life itself. It's not just staying in despair, it's really lifting up and, finding your path to wellness. It's so, and then I include very detailed protocols that I discussed with Dr. Filonov, even recipes, and I used a lot of meditations while I was dry fasting just to, keep calm during that process. So I include those in an appendix. And even for if someone is not ill, I think that it's an inspiring story and that we can all improve our health. And the world does present a lot of challenges with pollution and just the toxins that we encounter living in, living in cities. And so what my doctor, is always stating is that this process is for everyone. And, the people who I have seen who've seen me and then decided to dry fast have just felt marvelous. And so I would like people to have access to that.
I love it. Yeah, it's so true that our lifestyles today and all the different environmental factors that are so dangerous for our bodies, let alone all the crap that we put into our bodies and the things that are self-inflicted. So the more that we can do to position our bodies to be healthy, the better. So makes sense. Well,
Absolutely.
Michelle, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people learn more about you, and where can they pick up a copy of Starving to Heal in Siberia?
Thank you so much, George. So, Starving to Heal in Siberia is sold where books are sold. It's also available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all of the different web booksellers. I do have a website, michelleslater.com, and some social media accounts. I think there's a Michelle Slater New York on Instagram, et cetera, et cetera. So I may be found there. I've also written a blog. I wanted to point out for your listeners who might have Lyme disease or other illnesses that there is an audiobook available. I really wanted that to be out there because people who are ill can't just sit down and read a whole book. So I wanted to have the audiobook available. That is available now. So there.
Awesome. Well, if you enjoyed this as much as I did, show Michelle your appreciation and share today's show with a friend who also appreciates good ideas. Pick up a copy of Starving to Heal in Siberia wherever you buy your books. And also keep in mind that the audiobook is also available. And then go to michelleslater.com. It's MICHELLESLATER to find the blog as well. Thanks again, Michelle.
Thank you, George.
And until next time, remember, do your part by doing your best.